There we go, I think. Yeah. Wait. Hello and welcome to Liam's Lyceum, everyone. I'm your host, Liam, aka Himbar, and today I have a special video, as I have it's this way on my screen, a special guest. That is, of course, Christopher Ruocchio, who is the author of all these books you see around us right now.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I think this will be fun.
Yeah, so Christopher was kind enough to come on and just chat, essentially, with me. I did kind of want to go over, like, your writings first, so, I mean, people know who you are.
Sure.
And then we can just go from there, I suppose. So you mostly write, like I said, these books, which are the Sun Eater books, right?
So yeah, that's pretty much all I've written, except for one. I did one 10-page short story for Marvel Comics about Thor. It's the only non-Sun Eater thing that I've published. So, and I got into that through sort of a weird string of coincidences. So I've only really intended to be working on this series in this universe. The one exception there snuck in through the back door. And I've been working on them since, they've been coming out since 2018. I've been working on them for much longer. But yeah, it's been sort of, I guess, my life's work, which is a strange phrase to use, unironically. But no, I've got the fourth book is coming out. I don't know when this is going to air, but on Tuesday, the March 22nd. So Kingdoms of Death, which I think is over in that corner down there, is going to be out on Tuesday, and then Ashes of Man is out in December. So I've got two books this year, which is a big deal, very exciting. Definitely moving the story along, which is going to be real fun.
Yeah, and they're pretty great books. I mean, I don't know who's here who has watched my channel regularly, but my first review I ever did, which I like to focus on reviews mostly, was actually for Empire of Silence, which is the first Sun Eater book. It's a pretty poor review. As far as it goes, it was my first one, like I said. But I've done reviews for all the ones that are released, even Kingdoms of Death, actually. So, and I guess that's not out yet, but and so,
soon
right, soon enough. And actually, I read the first two books last year, and they my top 10 they got the number 2 spot for that year. And then I read Demon in White earlier this year, and then Kingdoms of Death, of course. The one thing that beat you out, Christopher, was the first 2 Book of the New Sun books, which I'm sure you probably okay with.
Yeah. I agree with you. So no, that's awesome. Thank you. That's really cool.
Yeah, so great reading all the way around, honestly. But it was interesting, actually, because I am not quite done with Citadel to Autarch. I might finish it tonight after I'm done talking with you. We'll see. And so I'm really, really enjoying it, of course. But it's interesting because you wrote Empire of Silence first before reading those books, correct?
Yes. It was already written, which this is a story almost nobody ever believes me, but I swear, on my honor that it is true. I had already written a draft, and I don't even know that it's the final draft of the book that became Empire of Silence, because it certainly wasn't, because it got revised really heavily after I sold it to my publisher.
Okay.
But I think it may even have been a draft earlier than that, and a lot of the terminology, words like lictor and peltast and things like that were already in use. Even like really obscure ones like anagnost and things like that were already in the book. And when I read Book of the New Sun, was my last year in college, I was like, oh no, right? And I've had this feeling several times. There are a couple, I won't say which movie it is, but there was a film that I went to see several years ago now. And there was a scene towards the end that was beat for beat. It was a science fiction movie, beat for beat, something I was planning on doing in one of the later books, still not written yet. And I actually screamed. I was by myself in the theater. I was like, no! And just threw my popcorn at the screen. So this is several times this has happened to me. This is something I think that writers don't, I can't think of ever hearing a writer talk about when they go and see their ideas already exist. But it's happened to me like 3 or 4 times in my life, and every time it's very frustrating. And so I'm glad that I didn't read Book of the New Sun sooner, because I would never have even tried to write these books. So all the terms were in place, and what I decided to do, because as I say, My first editor, she's no longer with my publisher, had me do a very extensive rewrite on Empire of Silence. Basically, everything after about chapter 20 changed. The book doubled in length. Everything was totally different. And when I did that, I said, I'm just going to sort of steer into the skid on this and embrace the Gene Wolfe because no one is going to believe me. And so there are a couple, sort of ideas or passages even that will more tightly allude to Book of the New Sun, because this is something that sort of I think where I differ with a lot of my contemporaries is that I think that writing in science fiction, writing literature generally, is part of a tradition. And we have the sense that, especially in science fiction and fantasy, that writers new works need to be these atomic, like separated, disconnected things. They need to be like hermetically sealed off from other people's ideas. And if you can see any fingerprints or trace any genealogies, then you're a hack and a cheat. And I don't get that. I've never been a person. I don't get that because it's not how culture works, right? It's not how mythologies work. You can see ideas that are either directly, genealogically descended from one thing or another, or that have sort of false genealogies, right? Like people like to say that, like the ancient Jews got Satan from the Egyptian god Set, right? And there's some sort of like you can see why they would feel that way, right? Because there's some sort of parallelisms, and maybe that's like an archetypal thing. Maybe there's an underlying metaphysic there. I don't know. But people will draw these false connections, or there will just be, like I say, some archetypal similarities. And so culture is always in conversation, and I wanted to do that really consciously. And so after I got over the like no one is ever going to believe me thing, I just decided the only thing I can ever do about it is just embrace it. And one of I think the cool things about having done that is there are a lot of particularly younger readers who have never heard of him, right? And so I get to tell people like, oh, you think I'm good? You should go read Gene Wolfe, or you should go read Tim Powers, or whoever, right? All these great writers that just people aren't talking about because they aren't, George Martin or Brandon Sanderson or whoever, right? Because as many readers as there are, the reality is that people tend to read like the most circulated, like 5%, and then like a smattering of new stuff. And the well is very deep, right? And some of the best water is at the bottom. So it's fun.
Comparisons as far as like mythology and stuff goes, but I mean, even like to me it seems more like a recent thing, like, oh, you ripped this off, and rather than looking at it like a homage or just an inspiration. I mean, because even I think like as far as published works go, it'd be like, when people looked at Shakespeare's what's his version, Troilus and Cressida or whatever, they probably didn't say, oh, you ripped off Chaucer's Troilus and Cressida. You know what I mean? Like, no one probably said that.
No, I think like even Hamlet was a remake, right? There was
Right.
another version of that play that was, I think, was it Thomas Kidd? I think had written like 10 years earlier, and so he was redoing that story. And of course, it's based on Saxo Grammaticus, this old Danish story.
Yeah, right.
Which we're getting a movie of next month, I think. David Eggers is doing an adaptation of Hamlet, right? Which is really something. I liked The Lighthouse a lot, so I'm trying to be optimistic. Hollywood's a mixed bag these days, and by mixed I mean not really mixed. So I'm hoping, like, because it's just such a weird, deep cut to get a blockbuster film about Amleth and Yarndil is really really something. So I'm taking my chances. But yeah, I think personally that it has something to do with like the commodification of art, right? And like everything is a product now. We talk about content, right? Every time someone calls themselves or me a content creator, I flinch. Every time I go into YouTube and look at the content tab on my studio panel, we live in a society. Excuse my dumb meme. But I think that's the problem. I think because like we've parceled up ideas and bottled them and sold them that people don't like they aren't as much a part of this sort of like lived canvas of like human society and culture anymore. And it's like, it's like people's childhood is Batman and Superman, and like people own that. Like people own the mythological like fabric of people's childhoods. And I think that's why too that like fighting within nerd culture and within so-called fandom has become so embittered is it is because people actually own controlling shares in the mythological makeup of people's lives. And so I being me tried to kind of ignore that and just to treat art like art and literature like literature, and to tell stories that are aware that there are other stories, right? And that's something that um, really that I learned from Dan Simmons, to name drop another science fiction writer, because that's what Hyperion is, right? It's Canterbury Tales, but in space, and like each of the stories is riffing on something, right? Like the Priest's Tale is written in epistolary form, like Frankenstein at the beginning is, like Dracula, and it's a horror story, right? Or in the detective story, it's all William Gibson cyberpunk like lingo. Like they have ice, they don't have firewalls, and it literally is like, oh, like Hyperion is set in the Neuromancer universe, but later because the internet works the same, right? And like nobody ever mentions that either, right? So I was looking at this and like, oh, like you can do this, it's okay, right? And that's been a pretty sort of organizing principle, I think for my work, sort of over as it's evolved, has been to be cognizant of this, because of course the future in the books, right, is our future, and it's a future where, unlike in stories like Dune, our cultural sort of patrimony still matters, right? People are like Hadrian is someone who talks about Shakespeare and Chaucer, he talks about Gilgamesh and Tolkien, but not explicitly, and all sorts of other things, and I think that's because that's how culture is, right? So anyway, end soapbox, I guess.
No, I agree. I would agree wholeheartedly, actually. And I think there's a tendency, at least with like, I mean, at least mentioning like something like Tolkien, there's a tendency with recent stuff to not consider it, so much. Like a lot of times you get a literature class, you're not going to read anything from the last 50 years or maybe 100 years, which is a shame, especially if you kind of want to figure out what's going on in people's heads, at a certain time period. But it's interesting actually when you think of like homages, though. I think Tolkien's like almost the one exception. Like how many people copycat Tolkien? I mean, we kind of get away from it like the past decade or so, a little bit, not completely.
Sure.
But I mean, how many books have I read that are essentially Lord of the Rings ripoffs? And that was okay. You know what I mean? Like I didn't have a problem with it as long as the story was good, of course.
No, totally. There's a Gene Wolfe essay called, I think, "The Best Introduction to the Mountains." I can't remember if I've sent this to you because we've talked before. And in it, he's talking about how people would make fun of Terry Brooks and stuff for ripping off Tolkien. And Gene Wolfe says, basically, and I'm going to paraphrase, he says, I'll take all the imitators we can get, we need them. Mostly because he's paying a lot of compliments to Tolkien in the essay, right? But he also says that, of course, like any copy of so great an original is necessarily, going to be inferior. But that being said, right, I don't think of myself as copying, Wolf, or copying, any Tolkien or anybody, right? I think that even Herbert, which is, if I get a criticism, it's that. Because I think I'm a very different person than Frank Herbert is, not least of which I actually like Iron Maiden. And if Iron Maiden wanted to write a song about my book, I would not say no. Yeah, if Bruce Dickinson catches this. but uh, but no, I think that it's more a matter of like synthesizing, right? I think that a lot of what art does is look, and a lot of what the artist does, right, whatever the medium may be, is look at a lot of different things that are happening either in other arts or in life, and sort of pull a thread out of them, right? And you can do that with fiction, right, in a way that is still meaningful even though the story is all fake, right? And
right.
because of course, like at the end of the day, these are stories about space Romans, right, and the scary aliens that they fight, and that doesn't have that much to like say about people's individual experience. But humanity is humanity, and there's still stuff that you can say about the human condition while you're killing robots. And it's not just for fun, right? Although being entertaining is the first job, I think, of a fiction writer.
Yeah.
So.
That makes me think of in one of my humanities classes. I'm a humanities major, and before that, I majored in philology, which I think I told you once, and then anthropology before that. It just depends on the school and that. But anyways, one of the things we were going over when we went over music was what makes music good. And it was a pretty interesting article the class read, and it was talking about how that if the music speaks to you physically and emotionally, essentially it's not good, but if it speaks to you intellectually and spiritually, it is. So like physically and emotionally aren't bad, you know what I mean? But it should be speaking to you in some other way. And while I think entertainment's good for entertainment purposes, hopefully for me, and it's really on me, I should be able to get something out of just about anything I read, whether it is space Romans, you know what I mean? And I got plenty out of it, to be honest. So, which is why I rated it so high. But that was just a thought. I kind of took that and tried to put that on entertainment as a whole. I don't watch a bunch of movies, but even like for that as well. So,
yeah, I tend to think that whatever really is true of one medium is usually true of the other. It's just a question of how you get there, and that's true of even things people don't think of as art, right? Like food, right? One of the things I like about food so much, besides that it's food, is that like it is an art form that has like an obvious subjective measure to it. Like there's a lot of what constitutes good food, right? But like everyone knows when it's not that, right? Like you can easily mess it up, and like everyone knows it's wrong. It's not like it's not like Duchamp's urinal where people will like twist themselves into pretzels to try and justify why it's worth your time or your attention. It took every ounce of my energy not to push it over when I was in the Modern Art Museum and face the consequences. But like with good food, right? Like nobody's gonna say this is critiquing, cuisine standards. Like no, it tastes like shit, right? Sort of like the one, and it's also a pretty humble art form, right? Because it's so transitory, and it's necessary too, right? So like, you can mess it up by just being terrible, or you can mess it up by being overcomplicated. And there are like literally like laws of chemistry preventing you from making certain choices without failure, right? And it's less open to interpretation. I do think that even those principles are true in literature. I think that you can make a story that tastes like shit. And while people will try to justify it, they ultimately can't, for as much as they'll pretzel themselves.
Happens a lot.
Yeah, but I do. I think that like all forms of creative expression are basically bound by the same sorts of principles of quality and how they're nourishing, right? Food is obviously like literally nourishing, right? Is one of them, right? It can taste good, right, which is emotional, right? But it also needs to, if it's a perfect meal, it needs to be good for you too, and to be balanced and all of those things. It can't just be, just you can't just be eating raw sugar, at least not all the time. So
Fair.
yeah, so I think that's an interesting point about the music, because I do think that sort of thing is broadly applicable.
Yeah, it was an interesting article to read, that's for sure. In that in that same class, we're going over some cinema analysis of sorts,
Okay.
and like I said, I don't really watch a lot of movies, but we went over some clips from Star Wars specifically, in which I know you're a big fan of Star Wars. I've seen them all several times. I'm not the biggest fan. I'm sure that's blasphemy to
I
some.
used to be a bigger fan.
Okay, well, The new movies kind of changed things, but
Yeah. It's that's a whole nother conversation, I think. But yeah. So Star Wars. Sorry.
no, it's good. I was just thinking because we were actually analyzing themes, and one of the things, when at least by the clips he showed us, was the theme of like nature versus technology as far as like humanity goes,
Oh, sure.
which is something I think that stands out a lot in all of your books, to be honest. Maybe not. I maybe wouldn't word it such a way, but like, when he says, was it Obi-Wan who says that Vader is more machine than man, and it's
Yeah.
just like, so makes me think of Sun Eater, at least. That's what I thought of in class when that clip played. So,
Yeah. So you're talking about like the extrastellarian stuff, right? And
yeah,
like
extra and but also like the Sealson even, I mean, I know they're aliens, but I mean, like, Hadrian tries to anthropomorphize them at the beginning, at least, so like, yeah.
Yeah, so I think in a lot of ways what that stuff thematically is about is that um with the body modifications and things like that is that there is like things have their natures, and I think that trying to change something's nature or to go against it or to destroy it is to destroy the thing, right? And technology is really good at breaking things. It's very good at building things too.
Yeah.
And so there are people who like to sort of destroy nature, right? And they don't, and those characters in the story, right, are really doing harm, I think, to themselves in an effort to become something else, to cast aside their humanity, right? As if like you can become a brain in a jar and still really be a person, right? This sort of like Gnostic, Cartesian dualism just isn't. I just don't think is viable. I think the science bears that out. If you look at neuroplasticity and things, people who receive damage to their brains do not act the same way anymore. The famous Phineas Gage case, right? He has a railroad tie, sever his prefrontal cortex, and he spends the rest of his life, a complete mess. He is no longer able to maintain human relationships. He's viciously aggressive, but not to animals, right? And like just isn't the same person anymore. And that's because like human beings aren't like like there's a silly Tumblr meme that used to go around that was like like people are just like ghosts piloting a bone Gundam. I'm like, no, you're not. Like you're a very complex organism, and that's without getting into metaphysics, right? Like there is not a ghost. There are parts of your personality that are in your spinal cord. Like we have a circuit that bypasses our occipital lobe completely and maps our eyes onto our spine specifically to get us away from snakes, right? And some people don't have that so well, and those people either die or are really into reptiles because they're not scared of them the way most of us are. My brother is one. So I'll leave you to guess what his hobbies may be. Actually, he's really accomplished in that field, so I shouldn't make fun of him too much. But he like breeds snakes professionally. But like my point is, right, like there are like parts of who we are that aren't just in our brain. So if you like put someone's brain in a jar and plug them into some cool robot, like that's not the same thing anymore. And the question is that still a person, right? I don't know. It doesn't feel like it to me. And
Yeah.
obviously, we don't quite live in a world yet where that sort of thing is possible. So it's maybe less fraught to talk about it than it will be in 100 years. But I also think that these are conversations worth having now because, science fiction does shape the course of human endeavor to an extent. I think science fiction writers greatly overstate that. I think they like to mostly imagine that our field is a lot more important than it is. Because even like they'll point at like the Star Trek communicator. The Star Trek communicator is already obsolete. By the time we have something like warp drive, we're not having little flip communicators. And in no universe does anyone want the TNG badge where your phone comes out of your chest. Nobody wants that. Well, I don't
Right.
know.
Right. I just finished Gather Darkness recently by Fritz Leiber, and it's a sci-fi novel, and it's from the 40s, and he does an okay job describing the tech. I was like, okay, I guess yeah, this could be futuristic, but like I just couldn't help but imagine it was like some probably like actually like 60s tech or something because he was writing it in the 40s, or something like
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah. Well, like we all thought that we would be on Mars by now, right?
Right? Yeah.
Which is of course hugely disappointing. But science fiction has always made these like really weird predictions that everyone is completely convinced are real. Like in the 70s, everyone was like, "Oh my God, we're going to run out of food." Like in 1973, we'll resort to cannibalism. We're going to be developing Soylent Green, and then like we're perennially running out of gasoline. Right? We've been running out of gasoline since the 1860s. Like never those predictions are never right, and obviously it'll happen eventually. And I'm not saying we shouldn't
Right.
work
Yeah.
nuclear or something, but like and my favorite one, of course, is cyberpunk. Right, like it's never going to be cool to have like your neck missing and replaced with like a spike. Like, of course, there are going to be people who like try to make that sort of thing chic, but like even looking at that video game, the CD Project one, right? Like I don't want to live in that world. Like it's terrifying.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Just pop my head off and put a new one. No, let me call that one. That future is not happening. But of course there are going to be people who want to do that, and I've tried with the Sun Eater stuff to really kitchen sink the whole thing. And if there is a science fiction idea, sorry about the siren.
Sounds
Uh,
good.
if there is a science fiction idea someone's had, I want to at least mention it, because it's a whole galaxy, So like, there's going to be space for these things. This is actually one of the places where I disagree with Frank Herbert. Right, the Butlerian Jihad's rule is absolute until the God Emperor's reign breaks down after Book 4. Very loose spoilers. Sorry, everybody. Book's been out for decades. I regret nothing. And so there aren't they've banned the use of thinking machines, right? And there are no exceptions there, and that's not possible in a galactic scale civilization. There are going to be cracks. And so I wanted to sort of riff on the idea of that sort of technological ban, but I wanted to go into the cracks because of course they exist, right?
Right.
There are always black markets, right? Every time you throw up a regulation, there are going to be people trying to bypass it, and that's not a reason to have no regulations. But you have to recognize the reality that like these things are never absolute; they never hold perfectly. And so that provided me an opportunity to not only be in conversation with Dune as a fellow author, right, but also to add this extra dimension of science fiction into the world building because it's something that those books don't explore at all. Likewise, there are no aliens, right, and that was something I wanted to do differently too. I wanted to do aliens, and I didn't want to do rubber forehead aliens. I wanted to do aliens that specifically differed in that they don't make any sense to us. Like they just don't have human psychology at all, and that's technically impossible because I'm a human writing it, right?
Right.
But you do your best, right, with the mortal limitations that we have as
Of course.
uplifted apes or whatever.
Yeah, we're all rather simian on the inside, huh?
Mhm.
But
At least half
but
the time.
I've only read the first Dune book actually.
Oh
But
well, I'm sorry. I still regret
no,
nothing.
no, it's good. It was funny though because I read Empire Silence first, like a month before I read Dune, and I had seen the 1984 movie though, and
Oh,
I was like, I can kind of see some similarities with Dune here, but when reading Empire Silence, I read it like I said, and I really enjoyed the book. I've been planning. I mean to get to Messiah here probably in the next couple months, but
no, cool. It's really short. No.
yeah, yeah, I see. It's on my bookshelf,
You
but
gotta, it always surprised me as a kid. I got it and I was like, what? I've been ripped off, Frank.
right. No,
Four
it's
times
like
this
it's Kingdom of Death versus Demon in White. Just not okay.
It's not quite that. I'm not quite that bad.
Okay, no, yeah, no, I
It
get
was like
it.
it was like a 30,000 word deficit, which is about how long Dune Messiah is.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
No, that's funny.
busted. Um,
But the mention of I guess we could kind of call it writing into the blank spot, right? When mentioning those other sci-fi things. So like I like that idea of, I mean, because you're right. I mean, there's no way that there would be, no one practice like using this technology in the galaxy. That's just not feasible at all. And but I also like how you said you like to explore some other things. I don't know if this is where you got this idea, but for example, the Commonwealth in Kingdoms of Death, which I don't think is going to be much of a spoiler. I mentioned it in my spoiler-free review, which because I think it's okay.
Okay.
It reminds me of 1984, and it also reminds me of the Askians in Book of the New Sun.
Yeah.
So,
This is part of that weird Gene Wolfe phenomenon. I always knew that I wanted the Lothrians to be like sort of hyper Orwellian, right? And I've always, the only part of 1984 I ever remember with any specificity is I think like chapter 5, and it's the one where Winston is talking to Syme, who works for the dictionary office, right? And they talk about double plus ungood and shortening the dictionary and shortening the dictionary. And I always knew the end result of this was there had to be like prescribed like official statements that everyone had to make, right? There's only one way to ask to go to the bathroom or whatever. And then Gene Wolfe did it. And rather than say, because it's been done before, I don't want to do it anymore, right? I wanted to do it my way, right? And this is another thing. I love that story in Citadel of the Autarch. It's Citadel is probably my least favorite of the 4 New Sun books. Not to thumb the scale here as you're reading. That is like saying like my least favorite Lord of the Rings book is The Two Towers. like
Okay.
really? Like you're gonna go there? I'm like, well, I have to deal with Frodo for a really long time, and he's less interesting than Aragorn. But it's such a non-issue, right? That
Right. Yeah.
it's like a silly thing to say. But I love that little bit because Gene Wolfe is able to actually tell a story by having all the sentences mean something other than what the words mean. And that's really cool. But I also don't know if a normal reader would understand that story if he doesn't have the other character editorializing the story. Because it's actually one of the few places in that book where he explains what he's doing. Because he has this character speaking in approved statements, right? All these government sort of like rhetorical parables. And this other lady who like has dealt with him for a while, her name's Spoila, is translating this guy's story. So he'll say like, it is appropriate for a man to be fed, and like, oh, he went and got a job from the like board of whatever. And if she's not doing that, I think most readers would be like, Gene, I don't get this chapter at all, right? Like, and that's usually a lot of readers' experience of at least a dozen chapters in Book of the New Sun. But I think that one would be functionally obtuse to 90% of the people who read the books without it, and I just don't know that society really, really holds together. So in the same way, what I wanted to do, and you read Kingdoms of Death, and this is only really this isn't really, really, really a spoiler. So we can talk about this. Is I wanted to look at the fail conditions of that system too, right? And there are places where like that system cannot deal with novelty at all, right? If there's a new object, they can't talk about it. And if you're dealing with aliens, for example, they can't talk about it. And so I wanted to do that. And how would the the lords of that communist civilization, because they're always lords, deal with that linguistic hang-up and have a mechanism for that. And of course, the thing about utopian sort of totalitarian ideologies, no matter which one you pick, is that they're always like becoming. They're never there, right? The 1,000-year Reich or the workers' paradise is right around the corner. It'll be in this world, I promise. I'll see you on Tuesday, comrade. Like, we're not going to have any more. Like, these factories are not going to be unpleasant, horrible places to work in exactly and worse ways than they were under the czars. It's gonna be better. I promise. There's actually gonna be bread this time. We didn't convince the farmland to totally produce the wrong stuff, and because we don't know what we're doing or whatever, right? Like it's gonna be fine tomorrow. Or conversely, like we're gonna get rid of all the undesirables in a minute, and our 1,000-year glorious, empire is going to, rule the day. Never happens. It's nonsense.
Right. Yeah.
And so
Too idealistic.
yeah, it's impossible, right? Utopia means nowhere, right? It doesn't mean the best place. It means nowhere. Thomas More is still flexing on all of these people, centuries later, and with one word. And I would expect nothing less, of Thomas More. But I wanted to look at the limitations of that, and the limitation is in that belief, right? The way not even the limitation, but I wanted to sort of focus on that angle, because obviously they would recognize at least the higher levels of the system isn't perfect, right? They can't ever tell the people they're controlling that, because that's not what totalitarian regimes do. But so they would have a mechanism for trying to amend the system, right? And that would be in service of the eventual utopia. So it really leans on the religious aspect of totalitarian communist thinking, right? This sort of eschatological, like the end is coming, and one day we will be in paradise things. So like I say, I wanted to look at these cracks, and that means too that there are people at the bottom who, when no one is looking, are misusing the approved statement to mean the wrong thing, or they've like reinvented names and things like that, because you can't actually beat biology, and human beings will always give themselves names, and so yeah, it wasn't like I say, it was I knew that it had been done before, but I still felt like there were parts of that hadn't really been looked at, and it's maybe too ambitious to really meditate on those things for like 4 chapters while I'm trying to do a spy thriller plot. But we try to think some stuff in, while we're trying to get to the big conflict, right? And so I will often sort of stop on the way on these little adventures to try and make some point, or deepen the universe in some way, which is usually the same thing. So that was a really long rant, but I was trying to cover for.
No, it's good. Yeah, no, I really liked it. By the way, I like the Commonwealth.
You're the first person to tell me that. Thank you.
Yeah, I was about to say, Jake, I don't think appreciated it all that much, but was it?
No, he wasn't a big fan of that part, but neither were my beta readers. They were like, Christopher, why are you doing this? And I'm like, yeah, we haven't done it yet. It's something different. I'm putting everything I own in this series. I've been playing Elden Ring, which I love, and I've played all the From Software games back to Demon Soul, and I was joking with my brother that Hidetaka Miyazaki is clearly a man with one idea. I don't know if you've played any of the games, but there's like always the same like little beats. It's always like the sort of mystical, like fire golden order of the world is dying out, and you have to either reinvigorate it, which might actually be the bad option, or you can embrace the darkness, and maybe that's more peaceful, and even if it's chaotic, it's good. Like it's the same story over and over and over again, and it's fine because the games are games, and the game part really holds up. It doesn't need a new idea. But I was joking that I'm also a guy with kind of one idea. I'm just putting all of my ideas under the same umbrella, and hopefully no one will notice when I'm still telling the same big story in 30 years, as part of this huge universe building project. Because I've toyed with like writing a fantasy series or something, but like I have this rule that if I have an idea that fits under the umbrella of this big continuity, I don't need to leave, because by mere association with like work that already exists, the new stuff gets a little bit deeper. just because it's already connected to all this other stuff. And so there's no reason to leave if I don't need to. As much fun as it might be to go visit knights and castles, but there is no reason I can't do that without leaving. Or there's no reason I have to leave to do that, rather.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, of course. Which is the missed part of the genre generally. That's not really done so much these days, actually.
Oh, you mean the Sword and Planety stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so I really like. Did you ever play Star Ocean, like the original ones?
I haven't, no.
They're like I can't remember what console it was. It's like a Sega or was it Super Nintendo? I don't know. But they were the first two were like 16-bit, like early JRPGs, right? And you play in the first game, you're like these medieval sort of like cat people aliens, which it's Japan, so of course, right? It's a JRPG, so they're cat people. And you do your usual, like, you have to go get the herbs to like bring to the village person, and then while you're doing this, like two Starfleet guys beam down and start talking to you, and they're from Earth and stuff, right? So it's like you can do this. You can put chocolate in the peanut butter. I just like I was a kid and I was like, this is not possible. You're not allowed to do this. And it really did a number on me. In talking about a lot of my my influences, I almost never talk about the video games because the JRPGs have no compunctions about blending science fiction and fantasy, right? At all. You'll frequently get like a lot of Final Fantasy games. It's like, mana is the power source that runs the giant robots. And nobody blinks, right? And the result is that you have a world of knights and castles and giant robots, and that's just cool, right? It doesn't have to make sense if it's cool, and if the characters are compelling, because that's what it's really about, right? I remember because I was doing the spiel, I think on a live stream, so it might have been with Jimmy Nuts. We were talking about sort of the same thing, and a couple of people in the comments were like, "Oh, so the science isn't really science." I'm like, that's not what inspires kids to go become scientists, right? Like, people don't, for the most part, go like watch Star Trek and like really like the communicator. There's the one guy who worked for Motorola, right? But like most people like watch Star Trek and, oh my gosh, space is cool, right? I want to meet aliens. I want to ride in a rocket ship. I'm going to work for NASA. Or failing that, I'm going to work for one of the companies that contracts with NASA. Or failing that, I'm going to write my own stories, which is kind of happened to me because I do math. And so that's what really does it. That's why, like, it doesn't matter that Star Wars is scientific gobbledygook, right? Like hyperspace. What's that? Oh, it's powered by hyperfuel. Okay, Solo, a Star Wars story. We're going to the spice mine for hyperfuel. I see. Couldn't possibly be smuggling spice. So weird. Anyway, it doesn't have to make sense because like we're flying around the galaxy fighting pirates and stormtroopers, and that is what makes people want to fly themselves. And so it doesn't matter, right, if you're giant robots and your knights are on the same page, as long as somebody is moved by that, as silly as it is to be moved by giant robots, but they're really big. They can move very easily.
I mean, it is entertainment. I mean, after all, anyways. So,
yeah.
That reminded me. Actually, I shared when I got my copy of Sword and Planet. I shared it in the Whetstone Discord. Whetstone's amateur magazine, Sword and Sorcery, and so that's like the best Discord for Sword and Sorcery talk. So that's why I'm in there. But I posted it, and someone was like, how is this sword useful when she has a gun? I was just like, well, there is actually a reasoning.
Why are you here? Read the story and find out. Don't ask dumb questions like that. Because the answer is you can always find a way. To tell the story that you want. I'm a big advocate for like having the idea first and explaining it later. And really too, writing to your strengths. I have like no firearms expertise whatsoever, right? I know writers who do.
Right.
I know writers who have their own guns, designed. I know a writer, I should say, who has a gun that's designed off of the gun in his book because he's that plugged into the firearms community. But I don't know anything about that. I do know swords, and I know how they are used, and I understand like classical and medieval combat tactics to a very limited degree. So I need it. I need to write a story that uses that because that's what I know, right? And I need to not spend 3 years learning new stuff because I need to write a book in 6 months, right?
Right.
And so you build a world that suits your expertise and your sort of like weird geekish fixations, right? If you are not a language nerd, do not make languages. You do not need to be Tolkien. You need to be you, right? That being said, I made a language, so which I regret sometimes because every time I finish the book and it's time to go and find all the lines I need to translate, I just okay, here we go.
Okay.
They're not in order at all.
Yeah, it's
Like which
fun.
page are participles on? Ah,
Yeah. See, that's funny actually, because I like language a lot. That's why I studied philology because of Tolkien actually. But I don't write a lot. We talked about this, but I mean, I do write some, and the way I translated that into my writing, since I don't want to construct a language personally, I
right.
tried that in the past, and I was like, I don't know. And so I generally just use it, and this is kind of a problem actually, probably with just vocabulary. I have a tendency to use what some people would say, way too many archaisms. And I got that from Tolkien and Morris and Gene Wolfe and a little bit from you. But I mean, like, and just, other literary works, of course, but I mean, I write for me though, right? It's like, I'm reading for me. It's fun practice. If you can't handle the archaisms, then, stop reading it.
You're not the right reader, right? That's it's an interesting thing because the writers that people complain about doing that, right? Tolkien, Wolfe, Lovecraft. Lovecraft's like biggest bit of criticism in his day was that he had this very dated style, right? But these are all writers everybody really likes. Gene Wolfe's obviously a bit of a cult thing, but nobody
Yeah.
really complains about Tolkien's antiquated style. It was actually Lord of the Rings' biggest threat of criticism too when it came out, was that this is really an archaic, sort of outdated, romantic, retrograde way to write a book. And the literary establishment still cannot unsnarl itself at the thought that Lord of the Rings is probably the most important book of the 20th century. And it makes them so angry because it is so against the whole like postmodern, minimalist, magical realist, even sometimes, smear that just this horrible gray, mire of human misery that I was, forced to read in my literature classes. They just cannot, they cannot accept that this dated, archaic Oxford Dawn was more popular than them. And so I've never worried about that in my writing. I don't think you should either, right? Because like you can only ever be yourself, and if you're a writer who's going to use archaisms, there are plenty of people who are going to not know what porphyry is when they read the word. They will either figure it out, or they'll gloss over it and they won't really care, or they'll go figure it out and they'll learn a new word, and they're the kind of reader who likes that experience, right? I've gotten a few reviews where people are like, "Do we need to use all this damn Greek? Like, why don't you just say soldier?" I'm like, well, centurion is not the same thing, and also that's Latin, dummy.
Sorry.
So, I just happened to pick a Latin one. I made it my hypothetical critic's fault. But like, that's not the sort of writer I want to be. Like, I'm choosing to use those words on purpose, right? There's a choice there, and if you're making a choice as a writer, right, even if it's a bad choice and you're making it consciously, then I think you're doing something right because you're making a choice, right? I think a lot of writers will do things just because, or because they don't think about it, right? There's I used to, before it became kind of lame. I used to read TV tropes a lot. And there was an article, I think it was called like Aerith and Bob, right? And it was critiquing like character names not making any sense together, right? You've got like, oh, people from the same village are named, like fantasy gibberish and Willem, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, why is that happening? Does everyone know that character is secretly an elf? And a lot of fantasy writers will do that because they're just not thinking about it. They just think, oh, these names are all really cool, right? And they're not making a choice. But if you choose like name everyone something that has 8 apostrophes in it, I am going to roll my eyes. But like good on you for making a choice. And I chose to use a lot of Greek. And if there are people who roll their eyes at that, that's fine. That's fine. But
Yeah.
I'd rather be me and have slightly less readers, right? But have the readers that I want than not use Greek, I guess.
Yeah.
Although
They're
that's
just
not
gonna
really
hate.
that's also never really been a big strain of criticism. I think a lot of fantasy and science fiction writers are pretty forgiving at this point. If somebody like, I don't know what an Oculus is, except for the Facebook glasses. I don't know that it's a hole at the top of a dome, but I'll figure it out. So,
Right.
I'm rambling a lot today, man. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. You're more interesting to listen to than I am, I think, in most cases.
I wouldn't say that.
Yeah, no, it's honestly, I think it's nice. I mean, like, to be honest, if you, for some reason, if you were to go and write something else at some point and not use so much Greek, I'd be like, where's all the Greek? And so it's just, if it's the aesthetic in this, now it does at least, right? I mean, like, that is, I've used this word in my Demon in White and my Kingdoms of Death review. It's Ruocchioian. I was like, which is actually kind of a mouthful since you have so many vowels in your name. But
don't I know it, man?
But I mean, that's just the way it is, right? So like, it's nice to be true, in the sense of loyalty, right? So I mean, it's nice to be true, and consciously so, because a lot of people aren't conscious of a lot of things. Anyways, even when they speak, they're not thinking about what they're saying, right? So
yeah, no, there's a lot of sleeping that goes on during the daytime for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I had a question real quick. I think Hadrian Marlowe is supposed to be based or descended, right, from, is it Christopher Marlowe?
Yes.
Okay,
No,
which doesn't work, right? But I mean,
but that is the claim they make. Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. You are writing that History of House Marlowe thing. Is that?
Yeah, slowly. It's almost done, actually. It's I've written about a 7,000 word so far essay that is a history of House Marlowe from before Julian, who's the first Lord of Devil's Rest. Actually, from like the reign of the God Emperor, basically, all the way up until Alistair.
Okay.
I'm gonna end it shortly after the sort of war with House Aran rather of Lenon, and sort of wrap it up there. And I want to do more sort of in-universe essays and just sort of slowly like whittle away at them because it's a different kind of writing, and so it doesn't really burn me out to do that and creative writing in the same day. And actually, even on days where I like can't get to the story writing, it's easy enough to get a little bit of that done. So I've been working on that. And yeah, they claim a lot of the great houses that saw an empire will claim some mythical ancestor in the same way I think that like Elizabeth II would claim Odin as an ancestor, right? Which is of course hilarious and probably true because I hate to break this to any Viking larpers, but like Odin was probably just some like shitty little warlord in like Bronze Age Norway who was a big enough deal in Bronze Age Norway that like he became a god a little while later, which like is by no means like a meager achievement, right? You kick my ass, but actually one of the things I really like about Frost Giant's daughter, the Conan story, is if you blink you'll miss it, but Conan kills Heimdall right at the beginning of that story. There's a Vanir or whatever named Heimdall that he puts down. I'm assuming that that Robert Howard is working on the same hypothesis, right? That the old gods of Asgard were just some Bronze Age people that the Cimmerian knocked off, which I think is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
it's
not
interesting.
a Conan story by any means, but that little bit always makes me laugh.
It's one of the shorter ones. That's true.
Yeah. It's usually right. It's right at the beginning of the collection I have, right after Phoenix on the Sword. It just
Yeah.
doesn't hold up by comparison. Just right next to one of the best ones, right?
Mine was my favorite of that collection was Black Colossus, actually. But
Black Colossus is really good. That one's great. My favorite Conan story is Tower of the Elephant, though.
that seems to be most people's favorites that I've talked to, honestly.
Yeah, I hate to be, not contrary for once in my life. It's really good. It has that like wonderful surprise, right, with what the elephant is and how,
Yeah.
and it does the science fantasy thing, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a freaking alien.
Yeah,
You know?
it's an awesome story. It wasn't my favorite from him, but it's an awesome story.
Yeah.
I love it.
I really like that story. Anyway, but yeah, so like Elizabeth claims Odin, right? Although they never talk about it. House Marlowe claims Christopher Marlowe, Elizabethan playwright, one of the authors of the various Fausts, and a person who famously had no children. So it's just like nobility does this, right? They'll make up these stories about themselves,
Yeah.
and with Earth being so, Earth being this mythic memory in and of itself, right? The eras that we occupy are to them the golden age of myth, right? And
Yeah.
which of course, is usually the case, right? Like, it turns out if you do your archaeology, right, that the Trojans were probably Hittites, and the Greeks did not dress like that at the time. And like, I was talking about this on I think another stream recently, so I apologize for their repeat here. But like, like the kings of Assyria called themselves lords of the universe, right? And they ruled like half of Iraq. And so real myth is a lot smaller. Like the truth behind these myths is a lot smaller, right? Arthur
Right.
probably never pulled the sword from the stone, even if there was an Arthur, and I think there probably was. But
There's a
like,
chance, right?
like, like there was no cool wizard that like got trapped in a tree by a witch. Like that part's not true.
Yeah,
Which is
of
lame.
course.
You know,
Lame, sad,
you know,
depressing.
Atlantis isn't some giant continent in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It's probably the Minoans. They probably got hit with the. Well, it's actually just an intellectual exercise, probably based on the Minoans. And that's kind of cool too, right? You go and learn like, wait a minute, the Trojan War like wasn't really like that. Like it was probably about some like trade disagreements or something. Who knows? And Paris's name actually is related to the Hittite word for guy in charge of city. So like there might have been a Paris, but I don't know. I still think that's cool, right? And of course, that's kind of like we're the truth behind these amazing myths that they believe, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I hope that makes like our time cooler too, right? So
yeah, I agree. It's
at least for a little bit.
Makes me that guy who rules city makes this one actually relates kind of, but it makes me think of daughter. I think the Sanskrit version of daughter, dochator or something like that. It means like little milker, So I mean, like fits whatever. Father means protector type of things if you go back far enough.
Yeah, there are these weird roots. Yeah, Proto-Indo-European word roots are really interesting.
Yeah, it's fun stuff.
They're really, really interesting.
What I look at in my free time when I'm not reading, fiction. But is one thing actually that reminds me of when you mentioned Heimdall with Howard. Reminds me of Ingwe by Tolkien. His oh gosh, is it the Vanyar he's the head of?
I think so.
Ing is totally a Germanic. He's mentioned Beowulf. And I think actually in the old English runic poem, it makes it sound like he had a constellation named after him too. That I can't remember which one it's supposed to. It's a spring one. Anyways, but That's also I like Tolkien a lot. I like a lot of the dramatic stuff. Not a lot of honest cases, more than classic stuff, but there's a lot more classic like sources, anyways. But it made me think of there's a warlord they found a grave for in I think 2020, like summer 2020, called the Marlow Warlord. Um, I don't know if you're aware of that. It doesn't have an E on the
Oh,
end, but
oh,
so I don't know if they finished like if they published their like findings from it, but just initially they're like, yeah, this is Warlord because it's definitely like a higher status burial, and he's pretty big, too. So, anyways, I thought you might find that interesting. Like I said, there's no E on the end, and this would have been like early Anglo-Saxon, probably like 7th, 6th century. So, but
that's really
anyways,
It's
uh,
really cool. I watched a video because the British Museum has a lot of good stuff. It was a lady talking about the Sutton Hoo sword
mhm.
and how the wear patterns, from the wear patterns on the pommel of the sword, they deduced this guy was left-handed, right? And we've still no clue who he is, right? But we can like pick these little things out, and those little details are often so evocative. Like I already like feel like I know the guy, right? Even though
Right.
I don't know about him, right? Which sorry, that's a complete tangent, but.
No, yeah,
But
archaeology has some cool findings.
yeah, it's just the thing, right? Like history is way deeper and weirder and cooler than a lot of the stuff that I make up. So I need to like that's part of why I borrow from it. So I have to like
Right. Yeah.
and try to put us today reading the books into that whole story. That's why I wanted it to be science fiction and not a fantasy universe, is I wanted to be able to draw on our world like explicitly. Because even if people don't really know a damn thing about ancient Greece or Rome, and they don't, I only know like two things. Right? Most people know like actually like -10. Uh, you know,
Fair.
if only because they have really goofy ideas about how things worked. Anyway, people, even if they don't know that much about them, it can turn around and they'll be like, "Oh, I know that word," and it means a little bit more, right? Because like when you read, I remember I had my neighbor read the Silmarillion when I was a kid. He's like, "Oh, what are you reading?" I'm like, "Oh, here you go," and that's not the Tolkien book to hand anybody, right? And he was like, "Yeah, I couldn't keep up with this. Like, it was like those names don't really mean anything to anybody yet, right? Give it a few thousand years, we'll still be reading Tolkien, I think, and people will be vaguely aware of Feanor the way they are about Achilles, right? Um, but like when people hear about Achilles, they're like, I know that guy. He's the guy with the heel. I think, I've got one on my heel, and so they're able to make these connections. And so when I wanted to do the science fiction thing and science fantasy thing in particular, because I wanted to be able to rely on a lot of that like baked in sort of cultural memory. And that dovetails too what we started talking about, right, with the Dune stuff, right, or with Gene Wolfe, right, because then my audience is mostly people who like science fiction. Although I really like the readers who are like, this is my first science fiction book, or like, which is usually like my brother's mother-in-law, or like someone who's like, oh, your brother wrote a book, I really liked it. Those are always interesting because they're like, I haven't read anything like this before. Like, this is like all new to me. And that's really cool. But most of my readers are people who already like science fiction, so putting this stuff in there does the same thing, right? I got a couple messages. You might have been one who was like, "Did you just mention Turin Turambar like by name?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "I did," because I could get away with it. If you do it just right, and that's cool, right? Because there's somebody who's gonna be really psyched about that little thing there, right? And that's a really special thing to be able to do for readers, right? Is to give them that feeling, which is a cool one. And by using the Greek stuff, I can kind of do that for more people because more people will catch the Greek stuff, I think, than the Silmarillion stuff.
Likely, I'd imagine.
Yeah. But that being said, I should say, dude, there's like two Silmarillion references, and they're very, very light, right? Because you can't like lean on this stuff too heavily, or it'll feel like kind of like weird. Like I saw the Batman a couple weeks ago, which I really liked. I had a couple qualms with it, but that the Riddler live streams at one point, in it,
Hmm.
to broadcast his evil plan, right? And it kind of works, but on the same level, like there's part of you that's like, live streams are not real. They are not in Gotham City, right? Like that is a fake thing that we do in 2022. Batman does not know what Twitch is. Twitch does not exist in Gotham City. And if you lean too hard on some of those references, people will, I think, pull back. Although I did read, it's a friend of mine, Pat Childs. He wrote a book called Frozen Orbit, and there was a subplot in that where this cosmonaut was unlearning Soviet propaganda because his friend had smuggled him a copy of Lord of the Rings, and so which like is an interesting thing, right? Because it's a very not not Soviet book, right? And it was actually handled pretty well as a sort of like really like C plot, because it was all like little flashback. It wasn't a big part of the book, but it was, I was reading a science fiction novel that was explicitly talking about Aragorn and Gandalf in different places, and that was really cool. And that was like the maybe the best case of a really contemporary, because it came out like 2020, book dealing with a book that's part of science fiction and fantasy land, right? Because usually people catch a reference to something like that, if it's not really light, they'll be like, why are we talking about, I don't know, Honor Harrington midway through? Why are we talking about Star Wars and Honor Harrington, right? Like, it's just not like if Wash and Firefly referenced Star Wars, like everyone would be like, what? There's no science fiction in this science fiction, So anyway.
Right? Yeah. No. So Sun Eaters is just essentially Tolkien Legendarium fan fiction. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah, of course.
No,
Everything I write is Tolkien fan fiction, if only because I, want to be him when I grow up.
Same.
So,
No.
yeah, I mean, you have to pick a science fiction fantasy writer to emulate. Like, personally emulate. I think that's a good choice. But yeah, I'm a big Tolkien fan.
That's good. That's not a problem here.
Yeah.
I don't think so. No.
Yeah, with that, I was trying to make it another digression. I just like, no, just big Tolkien fan. Rereading
No.
right now. So.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, actually I don't have I just moved recently. I have like no furniture, so my computer's sitting on like a TV dinner tray, but my microphone is sitting on a box of books, and the bottom box is my Tolkien box, actually, because I have to have that one. So
Yeah, totally, I get that. I am in not so different a situation. I am obviously in this empty room. All of my stuff is downstairs, and we've been finishing this room. So I did move some of the books. Which way do I have to go? This way. Up here. That's not where they're going to live, but I had to get them away from the water damage. So they live up here now. But I feel like I should explain in all these live streams that I am not a crazy person who lives in an empty house. It's just downstairs. This room did not exist until a couple months ago. So and it's not done yet. And the city inspectors don't like it when you move into your own rooms too early. So
those darn
laws
and stuff.
Rules, red tape. But,
yeah,
but very soon I should stop looking like I live in an empty house.
Yeah, same here. Hopefully, I might be crazy though. But so.
Yeah, I mean, I could be, but this isn't a symptom of it. So.
Speaking of books, so I do. I mean, I don't have most of my books with me, because I have several hundred. I don't really know how many, but I don't count them or keep track really. Yeah. But I got a book today, and it was actually I got two books. But I got the Florilegium of Madness, which is DJ Butler's Florilegium or anthology, which I actually read a couple stories already in it before talking with you. And I also got Shards of Honor by Bujold. So
awesome! I think you will really like both of those. You already like Dave's stuff. I think we talked about.
Yeah, I've read like 7 of his novels already. So I mean,
he's so good. I say it at every opportunity I possibly can. I think that DJ Butler is Dave to me, is
Yeah.
the most underrated fantasy writer like working today. He's so good. I'm not saying that because he's a dear friend, although that helps.
I agree, though. I agree.
But
I mention him a lot in my videos. I need to make a video dedicated to one of his books, but the problem was I read them all before I started my channel because I like him like that.
well, that would make his day. It really would. If he, I keep trying to mention him to booktube people because he's so good. I know people would like his stuff, and he just has been having a hard time really finding an audience, which I think is a tragedy. Because I say this too every time I mention him. His world building is just on a level that really nobody, not even me, is doing. The man taught himself Ojibwe to write his witchy war books because he had to write Ojibwe characters, and he's of the mind. He's very much like he very much wants to be this American Tolkien, right? But that means being American, right? And so he's got this like very like old American, like weird, like pre globalized American sense of what America is and its folklore and traditions. And so like that series is like so interested in like local idiosyncrasies and folk tales and language and things. Like all the characters speak in dialect, right? Like he's a
Yeah.
character at the right at the beginning of Witchy Eye who speaks in like a Richmond dialect and tells you it's like England, Richmond, right? And you know which English accent that is by trying to sound out the phonetic dialogue, and I cannot do that. And it
Man,
is
yeah.
very cool.
Those witchy books are so good. I still need to read Serpent Daughter, but I think I might get to it soon.
Yeah, he's working
Uh,
on book 5 now, I believe. Or
okay.
no, it's next. He is hang on. He either just wrote the sequel to In the Palace of Shadow and Joy, or he's writing it now and then
Yeah, it was something like that. I get his newsletter.
yeah.
And I need to correct myself. I did make a review for In the Palace of Shadow and Joy because I read that in like October or something. I didn't send it to him. I had emailed him before I read it, trying to figure out like if because he's got a bunch of short stories for Fix and Androget. And I was like, is there like an order or something at all? And so I emailed him. He was really quick and really nice to respond. But
Yeah, he's
uh,
pretty quick on the emails. But I love that series too. He did one for Sword Planet, which I'm sure you've read.
yeah,
But
I read it. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
I love that story. I have this running joke with him, right? That like he has this like mode where he just gets like really weird, and so because like he'll do weird antics like at conventions. Like he will like he'll move my like my favorite one. My favorite one. We were at a convention in Biloxi, and Charles Gannon, who's a science fiction writer, was stuck on a plane. And for whatever reason, and with no explanation that I can understand, he went around and apparently like all the convention staff was really worried that like Chuck and his other missing guests were going to be really upset. And Dave told them like, oh yeah, like Chuck is a bit of a loose cannon, so you should be really nice to him. And he like Charles Gannon is like the nicest man, right? So he just went around telling people that like, oh yeah, you gotta like be really deferential with Chuck. And he, when Chuck got there, he was like, everyone has been like really cagey with me. Like, I don't know what's going on. And Dave just laughed in the background, like his weird maniacal laugh. I'm like, why are you doing this? But so whenever he does this stuff, I'm like, oh, I see Strange Dave showed up today, right? And I got that story, and it opens with this character saying he might eat his own poop, right? Because he's like
yeah.
or something. I immediately stopped reading it and I emailed him, right? And I was like, I see Strange Dave wrote this story, right? And I should explain to anybody listening that like this universe of his set in like the far future where there are all of these like semi-human, semi-animal like offshoots of humanity. And there's like this dog guy who's like, I'm a dog, right? So like if I do any like weird dog stuff, like don't be alarmed. And like that's sort of the weird punchline that this story starts with. And it's like this weird murder mystery, but it has this strange, dog man in it. And it's
Yeah.
just weird. It reminds me of, have you ever read Cordwainer Smith?
No, I haven't, though I've heard of it. A few
He's
things
a
about it.
really like bananas, like strange sci-fi writer from like the 50s and 60s. He was a mathematics professor, and he was so shy that he couldn't talk to his class. He put his cat in a basket near the blackboard, and he spoke to the cat. Like he was a really weird guy. And he wrote all these books about these like uplifted animals who were like the sort of post-human, inheritors of Earth, right? and I can't remember, but like it's where the word uplifting comes from in science fiction, with reference to like like sentient animals and stuff. He was that guy, and he was the godson of Sun Yat-sen, like of all like weird things, right? And so like he's just a strange writer, and that universe of Dave's reminds me of Cordwainer Smith, and reminds me of Cordwainer Smith is not a phrase that I ever thought I would use in my entire life, but that's like Dave is a very got very like weird particular style. He's got, and his ideas are just very different. So if people want to read something very different, In the Palace, Shadow and Joy is cool. It's like a buddy sort of weird misfit adventure with these two genetically augmented mercenaries in this like post galactic empire future, like dying Earth thing, where they have to they get trapped in this weird like insurance scheme, which sounds lame, except that like their lives are on the line and everything is really weird. It's just a cool book.
Yeah, I'll second that notion. I mean, as far as reading weird stuff that's modern, I mean, when I read it, it reminded me. I haven't read Cordwainer Smith, but it reminded me of Vance, a little bit of Liber, and I categorize it, if I could give it a category, as Sword and Planet, a Swords Dying Earth, Sword and Planet. So
it totally is. Yeah, that was his sort of thought. He likes to say it's like, imagine like if the whole universe is just the Mos Eisley Cantina, right? Like overgrown. Like that's how like weird and like mishmashed it is, and like seedy and unpleasant.
That's a pretty good description.
Yeah, and I just think it's neat. But between that and the witchy books, I just think he's tremendous. And I'm saying that because he's not here. And I got to pay him back for telling people at conventions, like, they'll look at my books and like, oh, I see you're looking at those. Good choice. Do you like Dune? Imagine if it wasn't terrible. Like, oh my gosh, like I'm still waiting for like the hardcore Dune fan to like yell at him.
No, man.
And
I need to get him on my show, which doesn't exist, but
yeah, I'm sure he'd love to. He's great. I love Dave. He's actually going to be at my book signing next week. He's in town for a convention, so
cool. Okay,
I'll mention it to him. But yeah, I think anybody watching, like, if you want like a really weird, and it's like a one-off. Like that series is all sort of supposed to be kind of procedural standalones, right? With these two like weird mercenary guys. In the Palace, Shadow and Joy is super fun. It's not very long, and it's just fun.
And if you want a taste of it, I believe the short story Sacrifice is on Bane's website. So
that's true.
So it does slightly spoil a bit of the novel, but I mean, it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, his witchy war stuff is, honestly, some of the best world building. It's kind of footlock fantasy, but the magic and the language is crazy. And then his Hiram Woolley books too, I really like.
Those are really cool too. Those are really hard to categorize because I work for the publisher, right? And they're like, are they urban fantasy? And Dave's like, well, they take place in rural Utah in the 30s, so not really. There's not a lot of food there. But those are cool too. They've like got a weird sort of like I always remind me of like, and this is a really weird comp, but they remind me of True Detective. The HBO, I don't know if you've seen it. But it's a detective story. It's set in like the 90s, so the setting in Louisiana, the setting is completely different. But it does the same thing where it like picks this weird part of America that nobody ever tells stories in, and tells a story there. But like is really invested too in like the local culture and stuff like that. He actually did the release, like the book release signing for that book at the museum in the little town in Utah where it's set. Right.
Is it Helper? Moab right? Was the second one, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. I always get them spoonerized, but I think it's Helper, and so it's like really, really local, which is cool. It's really weird. It's part of America again. Nobody tells a story, and True Detective is pretty much realistic fiction, but it like flirts with it being Louisiana. It like kind of tonally slides into Lovecraft a little bit.
Huh.
Even though it's a crime story, but like obviously the Hiram Woolley stuff. Cunning Man is the first book, it's fantasy story, right? There's there's magic in it, right? Actually magic, but I can't remember. It's Jupiter Knife is the werewolf one, so there are werewolves in the second one. I can't. It's the mine. There's a
Yeah, it's the Jupiter Knife. Yeah,
yeah.
they're aware of something. They're not quite wolves, but
They're not quite wolves. Yes, not quite. But yeah, so like there's actually magic in them. So again, like True Detective is a weird comp, but it does the same thing with Americana, I think, where it's this really little like idiosyncratic slice of life and time, but it does a magic story and it's a mystery, right? And he's such a cool writer and he's such a decent guy, and I really I love everything of his. I actually early on, I was trying to do, instead of committing to YouTube channel, I was doing Facebook live streams because I had 700 people liked my Facebook page. So I thought that was the right place to try and do stuff, which was not a great idea. But I actually did. He let me read his a story called Dei Britannici, which is the gods of Britain, right? And it was this cool story. It's in the Ruocchio universe about revoking a bunch of people's baptisms to save them from Oliver Cromwell performing a act of sympathetic magic that would kill all of Winston Churchill, but not that Winston Churchill's army, right? And Isaac Newton's in it, and he's a sorcerer. It's just cool. It's just cool. It's cool stuff.
yeah, I need to read that one. It's actually in the Florilegium of Madness. So
Oh, cool.
yeah,
It's great. It's really good. Really good story. So in conclusion, DJ Butler, everybody, go now.
yeah,
The stream.
something for everyone, probably, right?
Yeah,
Gotta be.
He's great. He's
He
great.
even has he does write more like middle grade stuff too, which I haven't read. And I've read a YA book by him, The Wilding Probate, which takes his lawyer background, I think.
He's a lawyer. Not only does he speak Akkadian, but and he did. I haven't read the YA stuff either, but I have a cousin who did, and he really liked it. He's the right age for it. It's a little steampunk trilogy about like a robot version of Pinocchio. I can't remember the title right now. But the kidnap plot. That's the one. Steampunk Pinocchio has to go save Geppetto from trolls, I think. I think it's trolls.
I don't know.
It's great. It's great. Like I said, Dave's the man. And I usually he's my go-to for writers I think people should read, because if I just say Tolkien, they're like, yeah, I've been there, dumbass. So I usually mention good old Dave.
Yeah, right. He's I'm glad I found him, because I'm on Goodreads, right? And he doesn't do it as often anymore, but every once in a while Brandon Sanderson will come out with a review, and they're always 5 stars, I believe. And he came out with a review for a Christopher Husberg novel. It was actually the second in his Chaos Queen Quintet. I think it was the second book, might have been the third book. So I started reading those, and at the time he was on tour with David, and who I think was on for Witchy Winter, because he used to go out to all those Barnes and Nobles. And so I was hey, I'll check out Witchy Eye, I guess. Might as well. They're good. Fell in love. So
I went with them once on one of those tours, because we went from Salt Lake down to San Diego and then up to Vancouver, and then I flew home. Flew home from Seattle, and then they went and hit a couple places in Idaho before they drove back home. So I bailed out early, but I'd run out of vacation time.
Oh yeah,
but that was really fun. And Husberg's great too. His stuff's
great. Yeah. I wasn't living near where any of the tour stuff was at the time, though. After the fact, I did find a copy in Pueblo, Colorado, because I lived there for about a year. A signed copy of The Cunning Man. It's one of my few signed books I have, because they were just sitting in Pueblo.
Yeah.
So
well, he will be delighted to know that I've spoken to someone who caught one of those, because he used to travel a lot, right? So whenever he would go to places, rent a car to do business, and he would sign. And I think he's been in like 300 of the Barnes and Noble booths.
That's just absurd.
Which is so cool. I've been in like 50 or 60, but that's mostly because he dragged me to all of them on that loop, right? So, That's how we did the road trip. Those were our stops. You know, we like, oh, there are 4 Barnes and Nobles in Las Vegas, so I've optimized the route to hit all of them. It will add 40 minutes to our adventure, but you know, oh, that was cool, man. We went like went through like the Mojave Desert to get down to 29 Palms, and there's a science fiction bookstore in Joshua Tree, which is right past the Marine base in 29 Palms,
Huh.
right? I'd never been in a desert before, despite being a big Dune fan, so that was cool. You know, got to see the Joshua trees, and we did there's a sci-fi used bookstore. We did a signing at their Space Cowboy books, they published a couple of my short stories
Huh.
actually, and did a reading there. It was cool. Did a reading in the desert, you know, with some sailcloth over our heads, and you know, like 20 people, you know, it was kind of neat. It was a really cool little adventure.
No, yeah.
The guy who runs that place too is really neat guy. So that was really cool. Oh, whole parts of the country I'd never been before, and I, you know, got to go on the school road trip with some other writers, and that was fun.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty cool, honestly. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it
I
was like
lived.
2 weeks.
Oh wow, yeah. So
Well,
good.
it was a big one. Yeah, for sure.
Were you married at the time, or
It was right before, actually. It was a couple
okay?
months before. My wife would like me. It would be fine if I did that again, but I think, with the way the world's been, I don't know that that kind of tour is in the cards for the near future. So, a lot of bookstores
Yeah,
aren't keen on doing events still, even as things sort of relax. It's been tricky, which of course is why there's a YouTube channel now. So I have
right.
you.
Yeah, you
Know,
can reach an audience that way. At least you do have. Was it about 2,000 subscribers? A little less, a little more. No.
it's a little less. It's about 1,700.
Okay.
Which isn't so bad,
Yeah, it's
considering I
getting
don't
up there.
really do other people's book reviews, you know,
Yeah.
or like the usual booktube material. I mostly just talk about my own stuff and about writing. But
Right. Yeah. Which makes sense. You know, it's funny because I do a lot of content that isn't. It's rather niche, um, which is fine. That's what I want to do.
yeah, me too, right? You
So
know,
yeah, it'll be nice one day if I can get any of the short stories I ever write published. I can make a little video on it. That'd be cool. But we'll see if that ever happens.
cool. No, you should do it, and it's certainly you can do it. There are plenty of people who write short stories. I wouldn't let it get to you. You could be like R.A. Lafferty, the writer of the best short stories ever.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
That's how he used to introduce himself. I didn't know if you knew that joke. I thought you might have read Lafferty. If you've read a bunch of these others, he's great. Another really weird writer, but he
There's
mostly wrote short stories, and his whole
oh
thing,
yeah.
he was, you know, the writer of the best short stories. Like that was his like sales pitch for himself. Right? And
Yeah.
he did it so much it became unironic eventually. Right?
That's funny. There's so many authors I need to read. I mean, like I try to read a broad amount, but I mean, I always miss, or so far I have, right? I mean, like, or I don't read a lot. Like I've read one Pratchett book. I haven't read any C.S. Lewis, for example. I've read his Christian stuff actually, but not like any of his
But not
fiction,
his fiction, sure.
really. And so it's just like I don't know. I'm missing those people, but I won't miss them in the end, right? I'll get them. I'm pretty young, so I'm like, but I do actually write. I write more poetry than I write short stories. I actually
Oh,
have
cool.
one poem published actually already, but that doesn't.
That's awesome. That's hard to do. Now, if you've published a poem, you can publish a short story.
Oh,
You'll
good.
be
That's
fine.
good to hear. That's good.
Poetry, well, because poetry is so niche, right? That it's
Yeah.
so, and for whatever reason, like a lot of people still like try to write it, even though nobody. I don't want to say nobody reads it, but like commercially, like it's like a really hard sell, right?
Fair.
And so
Yes.
getting a poem published is like actually difficult, right? So awesome.
Well, it
I've
made me
never
feel
done.
good because I wrote it in 5 minutes. So I mean, like, it was nice.
It's the Proto story, right? He was a big jerk, right? But this one makes me laugh, right? He would pay for his restaurant tabs by drawing sketches on napkins, right? And
Mhm.
just let the restaurant sell it or whatever. And there's a story where like the restaurant manager's like, "Can you like add a little detail? Like there's not much here." And he said, "I'm trying to pay for my meal, not buy the restaurant." And like something to be said, right? Like you could shuffle it off in 5 minutes and get it published. That's the dream, man. I wish these things took me 5 minutes. You
Yeah.
got to look up on me in that respect for sure. But I was gonna say something. I don't remember what it was. Oh well.
That's okay.
But yeah,
But
no, that's great.
no, yeah, it's definitely something I'm proud of, but it doesn't seem like a lot, especially since it was at the end of 2020, so nothing since. But
I haven't had a book out since 2020 either. Next week's a big deal.
okay.
It's been a difficult little stretch, I think, for everybody. So
Yeah.
you're fine.
um,
Remember what I was going to say though. I really the one thing I really envy about like the older generations of fans, right, is that it used to be possible to read everything. The field used to be smaller, and like there are advantages to the
yeah.
field bigger, obviously, but like now it's impossible to get a sense of what science fiction is anymore, and that's never coming back, right? Because and this is something you see in a lot of fields, right? This is heavy metal's problem is it doesn't have an identity anymore because its identity is 800 different identities, and there's advantages to that, right? Like because there's only one identity for an art form, right? And it's not for you, then that whole thing isn't for you. And so if there's 800 flavors of science fiction, that means more people get to like it. But the trade-off there's no like forced projection of what the field is to outsiders anymore, right? Like people who aren't conversant. I say outsiders, right? But like I mean just people who aren't conversant in science fiction. And like and nobody inside can agree, right? Like it used to be the case that like there was a pantheon of like the really great sci-fi writers, and like you may like not like that pantheon. There are a lot of them I don't like myself. I'm not like I'm not a big Asimov guy, for instance. I'm not saying he's bad. It's just not for me, right? I much prefer the sort of like pre-Campbell writers, right? The Howards and the Burroughses and them to that sort of the golden age generation, right? But when there was the golden age, right, there was like this is what science fiction is, and that impression was so strong that people still think science fiction like should be Campbellian, and that if it's anything else, and obviously, like I'm not a big fan of that one projection, but right when the field was like had that one singular identity, right, then people like could point to it and they'd be like, that's science fiction, and that has its advantages too, right, and not least of which is the whole field was small enough that you could actually take it all in. You could be a completionist, right? Because I used to work with this guy Hank Davis, right, who'd been reading since he was a kid. I think he was born in the late 40s. And he and I would put together these old reprint collections of stories going back even earlier than that. And he, like, you could ask him, like, even after he had some pretty serious medical stuff when I knew him, and like his memory was never quite the same, but he could always tell you what the cover story was in Analog on any given month, right? And he was always right. And he's like, and I think that there was a backup story in that by like Bradbury or whoever, I don't, and he would be able to find the stories, like he could put together the anthology in like an afternoon, right? He's like, I want these stories, Christopher, go talk to the agents, right? Because that was my job, was the paperwork. But he could do his part in like 4 hours, and it's because he knew the whole field, right, up until like 1985. And you can't, it's literally impossible to do that now, right? Like 1 million books are published a year. And like I wish I could read 1 million books a year, but
That'd be nice.
you can't, right? So that trade-off is a little, there's something a little sad about it, in the same way that it's sad that the elves are leaving Middle Earth, right? Like,
Yeah. Right.
But at the same time, right now, if I only want to listen to 80s like sort of nostalgic traditional heavy metal, and I don't want to listen to any of the growling stuff, I never have to, right? And so I totally get why people will say this is the best time to be a reader. I think that's probably true, but I think it's probably the worst time to try and be an omnivore. Anyway, yeah, I'm really envious. I think that the world was fair in Durin's day, so to speak. No.
It's never the same.
No.
It's I mean, speaking of that, I mean, like, it's hard to choose who and what to read. I mean, I know we mentioned Gibson earlier, and I haven't read anything by him yet. I do have Neuromancer. I just got to cancel for Leibowitz. Okay, I was like, how do I say this? And
I say
then
Leibowitz, but I think I've heard
that's probably correct. I mean, looking at it at least, but that's a guess as well. But
doesn't Annie Leibovitz say Leibowitz, the photographer? I think she does.
Do they? But most people also say Fritz Lieber, and I say Leiber. So
yeah, I don't know. Anyway, it's awesome. In conclusion, my favorites though.
Yeah, so it's just like, I mean, I also got like a copy of Childhood's End. I've never read any Clark. I've read some Asimov and stuff, but or like I have a copy of A Voyage to Arcturus by David Lindsay, which I don't think is rather popular at all, but I think it's from the 20s and it's sci-fi. I'm pretty sure it invented a new pronoun for the aliens or something in it. Anyways, which was an interesting thing for 100 years ago. Like I have this space trilogy by Lewis as well. I haven't read, but there's just so many. Like I had that Burroughs's Princess of Mars for a while before I read it. I just finished it last week, and I've had the Sword of Rionan for a while as well, and I haven't read that one yet. So there's so many, and the problem is that like I just got Shards of Honor. It's like, when am I going to read this?
I'm gonna do it. Yeah. Well, you just build the stack, and either you read through it, or it gets so tall and it crushes you, and you die, and the problem is solved.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to do it, I guess.
Yeah, that's. I mean, that's what I do. I don't buy that many books these days. I used to, when I was in the office, I could just take them, right? So. Was one of the perks of the job, and since then I have been I ended up with so many I didn't know what to do. I ended up taking a bunch back to the office discreetly. I didn't read this one. No time. And that really cured me of buying 100 books at a time. Boy, I used to. Because the library wasn't really the bookstore was a lot closer than the library as a kid, so that was a habit forming, for sure.
Yeah, it's I buy less books now than I did. In fact, I really don't like. This is a booktube thing. Book hauls are very popular. I've done a couple in the past. I think literally just a couple. I think I've done like 2, maybe 3. I don't really like them. So, I mean, like, I don't like doing them because it's like, here's my book I haven't read, I guess. I bought it. I have money, or I did. I don't have any money anymore. But like, that's just, I don't know. That's the thing for me. I never really enjoyed them that much anyways, which I'm sure is again, probably a heresy to.
I think I broadly agree with you. I did I did a video on the list of books in my TBR pile, which is a little bit different, right? And I did that because a bunch of people kept asking me, and like it was a weird stack of books, right? It was like mostly nonfiction. There was there was a play in there. Like I think there was a play in there at the time, and it wasn't like useful. Like it was kind of an anti-booktube video. I mean, not in the sense that I'm against booktube, but like it was just the opposite of what like booktube usually does. I'm like, here is a 150-year-old history book written by a Frenchman. That is not what that is not a couple of those people are looking for, right? Because like I get the appeal, right? You like want to see like 50 books that someone who reads the things you like is reading, because at least 3 of those you probably haven't heard. Right. Totally get it. But like I've always been that guy who people are like my old roommate used to for years like bully me about reading Berserk, right? And I just didn't want to do it. And I love Berserk. It's my favorite manga series of all time now. So he was right. But like whenever people like tell me I should read something, I just sort of like, yeah, okay. I'll put it on the list. And there isn't a list, right? Yeah, I'll get to it. Sure. And almost never do I go immediately like buy the book and put it on the pile, right? Like, never happens. And frequently, like it's because I'm just being obstinate, right? Because I loved Berserk and I should have listened to him sooner because I could have liked it sooner. But I often feel like my preferences are really idiosyncratic, and looking at a like scattershot video, like 50 new books, is not going to help me that much because like oh, another grimdark low fantasy novel, cool. I'm so excited. I bet everyone's miserable, and this fake European country has never heard of clothing dye. Like I'm looking forward to. I'm gonna go read Lioness again, or Leoness, and
Is that the Vance one, or is that?
yeah.
I have not read that one yet.
It's rare to read a fantasy novel that actually feels medieval, in its setting. Like even Middle Earth doesn't really feel medieval. It feels antediluvian, right? It feels like
Yeah.
this, magical, place. And same with Conan, right? It doesn't feel like a real place, but like Leoness, like this is credibly like fake Europe, right? I'm here for it, and that
Yeah.
actually never happens, right? So whenever people are like, I'm so tired of European fantasy, I'm like, how? Like, we've gotten 0 of them. We've gotten a lot of
Fair
Gygax land
enough.
novels. Not that
Gygax.
like I'm gonna turn my nose up. I want to read like that. Someone's like, "Oh, this is set in the Mauryan Empire." I'm like, "Please, more of that, please." But like we don't like if we actually got a fantasy novel that was based in like medieval France, like I would faint.
Besides Religiary, but doesn't feel medieval actually at all. But which actually I just finished. I don't know if you read that one. That's by C.L. Moore, writing weird tales with Howard and Lovecraft. So I really enjoyed it actually.
I have not read that one, but I love C.L. Moore.
So yeah,
she's in this basket. She's actually someone I mention frequently when I talk about this basket of writers that nobody reads anymore, right?
Yeah.
Lee Brackett. We talked about Sword of Rhiannon. She's in there, and even like Liber, like people kind of heard of him, right? There's a sort of a coterie on Twitter that like tries to bring Fritz Leiber back, right? But like,
well, I hope they succeed. But I mean,
yeah, I do too, right? But like, there's so much like science fiction has done a really miserable job of like protecting its traditions and its history. Like, there's been like no because part of the problem here, right, is now there's 800 science fictions. Like, nobody really is interested in the Republic, right? Like, we're in this weird empire stage, and and then nobody's interested in this older period, and it just all gets lost. And like people be like, oh, like I read Foundation. I'm like, cool. Did you like read anything else from that period? Like, are we only keeping Asimov? Which like I did read Foundation, but like, man, like there was some really cool stuff back then.
yeah.
Vance,
I mean,
Vance, yeah, and of course
I've only read 2 Vances so far, which is a shame. But
yeah, he was roommates with Frank Herbert for a period of their lives, which is really
wow,
cool. They like shared a house
okay,
in like Mexico or something.
that's really interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, just like the 2 of them and their wives, like just
Yeah,
in Mexico for, which is
it's interesting. Sorry,
no, it's cool.
I was gonna say it's interesting because like I like you mentioned Gygax. I like a lot of D&D type stuff, and I've never played this one, but Dungeon Crawl Classics, Goodman Games, they actually have a magazine, which I don't know if you've heard of it, Magician's Skull, which is a sword and sorcery magazine. It's like actually in print,
Cool.
like an old one. So I get those. Those are awesome. They each have art for each story. The covers there's like like the last one was like San Julian, for example. So I mean, like, they're pretty awesome, and very like no one knows about them. And I'm in like these weird circles of like sword and sorcery and like more classical stuff that it's almost an echo chamber because no one new is coming in. You know what I mean? They're generally older people. A lot of them are very well versed in it. They know what they're talking about. They're Hugo winners themselves. For their blogs and stuff like that. And just like,
Sure.
okay, I'm just like this guy that I don't know how I got here. But I mean, I read The Dying Earth and I loved it. Or The Eyes of the Overworld. But it's just interesting because like Goodman Game, they also make the Lankmar setting, which I know D&D did in the 2nd edition, but they also should be coming out with the Dying Earth Vance's setting soon.
Oh, they really? That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's really weird, right? Because that's where D&D got its magic system from.
Yeah, right. Prismatic spheres, whatever. Looking all over again.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so they do some pretty cool stuff. And I need to finish the Dying Earth so I can get to some more Vance. I do have his what's it called? The Demon Princes, Kings, Demon Princes. Is that it?
Demon Princes, I think.
Okay, I have the first one of that, and I did read actually the Michael Shea Dying Earth book, A Quest for Symbolists, which was pretty interesting. I hear it was ignored when Vance went to Kugel's Saga, but that's cool. Whatever, still an interesting book. So
Yeah, well, what's really cool about that is Vance gave him permission, right?
yeah, right.
Which is really cool. Just like of him, right? Because that's like just it's not something that people would do. I don't know that I could do it, right? Either, right? Like it would.
Yeah.
I would have to be pretty impressed. And I haven't read that. I did read Niftaleen, the Michael Shea's own
Yeah,
thing.
I've heard some things about that one. I need to
Yeah,
read.
I really liked his writing. I just didn't like the stories didn't work for me.
Mhm.
But he did. He every now and then he would have this like really really vivid like spiky detail that really really stuck out, which is I find a lot of prose kind of like flows together and just gets lost. But he would have these like really sort of grisly descriptions of his like underworld, and it was just really like it was really cool being in the world, but like what was happening wasn't really gelling for me. Um,
Yeah.
and I did like though because Niftaleen itself, right? There are three books, but Niftaleen itself is like four novellas, and they're all written from different
Oh.
points of view, which is and like one of them is it's like about Nift. It's not from him himself, and there's one that's clearly written by him, but not actually, right? And like I love stuff like that, and that worked, but at the same time, like still the plots weren't really gelling. But it felt more than anything else like Howard of all the things that I've read. Like it was really trying to get into that space. And effectively, more effectively than certain Sprague de Camps I might name.
Which I haven't read any Carter or I do plan on reading the Incomplete Sorcerer. Is that what it's called? Enchanter, right?
I think so. Yeah.
By DeCamp. So I hear it's actually a retelling of um, Tom Shippey pointed this out. So if I'm wrong, then he's wrong. But of crap, a saga about Thor actually. So
Cool. Oh, neat. He's by no means a bad writer. I don't mean to make fun of him, but like his Conan just isn't Conan.
yeah,
Um,
that's what I hear.
I haven't even read that much of it, but although I suppose on the no, I can't make that joke. Never mind. On the spectrum of successors from X to Christopher Tolkien, he's probably closer to Christopher than to X. But he's still
Probably.
not like they're serviceable, but they're just not
Yeah,
like
no, and I like what he did in kind of as far as the genre goes, is like kind of preserving it, or at least that was I think his idea, you know, with Howard at least.
yeah,
So
he's kind of Howard's August Derleth, right? Because is we need that. That's the protecting the history thing I was talking about, right? Like August Derleth thought that H.P. Lovecraft's stories were good, and so he started Arkham House or whatever it was called, and
mhm.
kept them going, right? And that was when they got successful because he cared about his friend's work and he really believed in it, and that's cool. And that was something that's been so cool about those anthologies that I used to put together at Bain, right? Especially the old reprint ones. Is we reprinted a Poul Anderson story from I think 37 or 57, which is a big difference.
Okay.
57. 57. I
Okay.
can't remember. 57. Um, uh, it had never been reprinted, right? So we found a Poul Anderson story that existed in a magazine in the middle of the 1950s and then never again. And we had to rerun it. And is it Poul Anderson's best work? No, it's not his best story, but like it is cool that I got to do that, right? And I think we did
Yeah.
that with English, and I think we did that with a Liber story too. And I can't remember what the Liber story was called.
Yeah. It's
Um,
nice when that happens though. I mean, like, because I mean, I have some old books, and sometimes I have those old books because it's the only way I can read the story in it or something like that.
yeah,
Like I have Andromeda 2, which has a Tom Shippey story in it, short story, which I was like, I want to read Tom Shippey's short story. He didn't write that much fiction. And so I found Andromeda 2, which is from the 70s, I think, so,
how was
but
it? His story?
it was
Because
actually pretty good.
yeah,
It reminded me of, well, didn't remind me of it when I read it because I just read this. I read Elder Race by Adrian Tchaikovsky recently, which is dedicated to Gene Wolfe, actually, because it's heavily inspired by Trip Trap, which I haven't read either. But it kind of reminded me of that. It's like a
I
blending
love
of
that
fantasy and
story.
science fiction. So
I love that story. You will love it too. I think that one's right up your alley.
yeah,
Um,
I plan to read a lot more Wolfe here. So
yeah, I was gonna print that. Originally, Sword and Planet was supposed to be half old stories and half new ones.
hmm.
The old stories are usually a lot harder to track down and get sorted out, so I ended up going with all new stories for it. But I wanted to run Trip Trap in it originally, and I could probably have gotten that one because I've worked with Wolf's agent pretty frequently, actually. When I was at Bain, she's great. But we ended up doing all originals. So I read the story for Sword and Planet and then didn't use it, and it's super cool. It might be my favorite Gene Wolfe short story. It's really early in his career, but it's got a Starfleet officer basically and a medieval knight for like an alien medieval knight,
Oh,
and they fight a troll on a bridge. And that troll may be also an alien from an ancient empire that doesn't exist, and it's written from their points of view, right? It's very subjective because it's Wolf, right?
of
And
course.
so the words referring to what's going on are very different depending on who's narrating what, and it's really really neat. Um,
Yeah,
so
it sounds like one I'd like a lot.
yeah,
And I think you would probably like the shippy story. It's called King Dragon, so it's King, comma Dragon. But so yeah,
cool.
if you can
Um,
find it somehow, and if you
yeah,
have time, if you, I mean, I guess that
for the hunt, yeah.
right. That makes me think of a question. What are you reading right now? I know you don't generally read like fiction when you're writing. So
You
just
know, I make a few exceptions, right? I'm rereading Return of the King right now. Was really the only thing I'm reading. I had been planning to read I'm planning to read the soldier books, Gene Wolfe soldier books, which I've never
oh,
read because I came to Wolfe so late, and because he immediately jumped to the number 2 spot for me with Book of the New Sun, just on my list of favorite writers. I realized that I needed to like ration everything that he wrote because he passed away shortly after I really became a big fan. Because I was trying to get a blurb from him, and it was
oh,
right around the time Rosemary passed away, his wife, and then he was in the hospital, and then he was gone, and it just like
mhm.
I was just kind of like afraid to. I didn't want to bother. Like I knew this stuff was all going on. I didn't want to bother him, and I missed the window. Right, I didn't even write him a letter, and I meant to do that, and it really bums me out to this day because I'm friendly with Mark Aramini, who's sort of a big Gene Wolfe scholar, right? And he's like, "Oh, you should have done it." He totally would have answered, and I'm like, "Oh, I feel like such a fool." Uh, but um, but I was gonna read those, and then then the Andy Serkis audiobooks came out. And I'm like, I need to listen. It's Lord of the Rings time. It's been like 2 years, and because I've already like I've literally read or listened to Lord of the Rings 100 times in my life. Uh,
It's quite a
I
bit.
well, the only audiobooks I owned as a kid because I had the CDs, and like audiobooks used to be ridiculously expensive, right? This is before Audible had credits, and
Hmm.
before back when you could actually own them. I had the CDs, the old English recorded books from like '93 or something, and I would get to the end of them, and then I just listened to them again, and that was like grade school for me. Like that's how I just like I went to bed listening to Lord of the Rings. When the CD ran out, I was done, right? Um, and so I've read Lord of the Rings a lot. And but with the new recording, I thought like, okay, it's time. And as much as I'm enjoying, Andy Serkis going full of Gollum, like I every time he doesn't, enunciate a sentence exactly the same way, I have this very strong memory of the original recording. Like you did it wrong, because I've listened to him so much. So I've been listening through that. Um, I'm in the like third chapter of Return to the King now.
Oh
And then
man.
after that, I'm either going to start the soldier books or I'll do New Sun again. Because like you said, I don't do because it'll only be my like third time I think for New Sun, which is like the first time for New Sun basically.
Right. Yeah.
And the Long Sun audiobooks just came out on Audible,
Yeah, I heard.
so I have read those. I read those last year actually, but I wanna I think I'm going to get more out of it if I listen to it because I'm a very auditory sort of person. So I don't have any like big cool incisive answer to that question right now because I'm not reading anything that interesting. 'Cause I'm also in the phase where I read the least, which is like planning. I'm starting the
Uh,
Outline for book 6, and when I do that, I really, really don't want to like start anything new. But I've got a whole stack downstairs of mostly nonfiction that I've been meaning to get into. I got a book, I think it's called Always with Honor. It's a translation of his name is Piotr Wrangel. He was a Russian general in the White Army in like 1920, like as the Reds were taking over. And so they say that history is always written by the winners, but like the losers totally write books. They're just way harder to find. And my friend sent me a copy, and he was like, "Dude, you should read this." Like, I didn't even know this existed. So that's
that
been
sounds
on
pretty
my
cool.
table for a minute. It's not even that long. I just stuff like that. I always feel like deserves a little bit more attention than a science fiction novel, right? And
Yeah.
it's hard to like work up to trying to engage with stuff like that. Like I when I did that TBR video, I was like, and I bought the Gulag Archipelago, not to leave, uh, the Russians for a minute there. I'm like, I'm gonna read this, and like I haven't even started it, right? Like it's just sitting there. It's just like, do I want to read about this right now? Like, the answer is no, man.
There's no.
I don't know when I'm going to get there, or if it's just going to sit on the shelf to like make me look like I read Solzhenitsyn. I mean, I read Ivan Denisovich, but that's a lot shorter. Um, that's something I plan to struggle through eventually. But like most of what's actually in that stack of books that needs to be read is like that. It's not like I took all the fiction out. I read Niftaleen and I read Long Sun, which is the fun stuff in that pile. Everything else is like work.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. That's.
it was like Russian stuff, and then like Butler gave me suggested a good translation of the Enoch books, right from the Ethiopian scripture, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I've got that. So like it's like really academic stuff. It's not. So I haven't started it because I'm playing Elden Ring and
No, I
writing.
feel you there. That's
Um,
funny. I do, but I'm about the same with nonfiction normally. It seems like I think that's a lot of people probably. We know there's people out there that are the opposite. The fiction
they're
goes
like,
on the shelf.
Skeletor, really, you loser. Why does he have a sword if she has a gun?
Yeah. So, but it's funny. I'm not reading any nonfiction right now. I did read a little bit of Beowulf and Lyra, which is edited by John Niles, I think. Which
Cool.
is it's an archaeology book mostly actually.
Oh,
It's
neat.
got the afterword is by Tom Shippey, which is how I heard of it. And it's just the connections maybe between Hera and Lyra, which is a place in Denmark, of course. I didn't finish it. The book is $400 to $800, so I had a library copy. So I returned it to the library. But and then I think I might start because I got the audiobook here for Boethius Constellation of Philosophy. I have a copy, not with me, which is why I got the audiobook. My I went to one school for one semester, and one of my professors there, I had essentially two philology professors, but one was Germanic and one was classic. And so I took a Latin class and Roman Republic, or Fall of the Roman Republic class, actually, from Professor Joel Relihan, who has done his own translation. Like, so like English verse, and I'm like, okay. I started reading it at one point. I was like, if I'm gonna read this as verse, like this is too much right now. So like,
Yeah, no
uh,
kidding. That's really cool though.
yeah. So I think I might listen to it at least for a first time through. But besides that, like I said, I'm going through Citadel of Autark, and then I am listening. So since I've moved, I've had a little bit less time in some areas. So I've been reading, and I'll have an audiobook going at the same time. I actually recently did The Hobbit as narrated by a circus, and I need to continue on to Lord of the Rings. It was interesting because I had listened to a audio like drama-ish version of The Hobbit before on YouTube, by a guy named Bluefax, I think. And he just did
Oh
the whole
yeah,
thing
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and put it on YouTube. They removed it, for whatever reason. And so it was great. In fact,
I
I would
love this.
say it's
Yeah.
better than circuses, but that's my opinion. And it's not there anymore anyway, so circus is a good one to go for. But
Yeah, yeah. Well, you listen to the circus recording for Gollum, right? And it's
yeah,
100% worth it, right?
right.
But,
Yeah, except for he does say Glowin and Owen, but he doesn't say Thrawn or Don. He says Dane and Thrain, which I guess is a nitpicky thing, but whatever. Most people say Thrain and Dane. So, but
I
I
do.
am. I
Um,
forgive you.
yeah,
No.
my expertise is in so-called tomato Europe, not not potato Europe.
Okay. Um, but I am listening to the new Elric thing that came out. I read Elric and Melniboné last year, and so I'm listening to The Fortress of the Pearl since I hadn't had time previously to actually get into book 2.
Yeah, I hear Elric sounds pretty familiar. Yeah, I want to check it out too. I've never been a Moorcock fan. I might even be a Moorcock enemy. But
Well, he likes to hate on Tolkien, so that
yeah,
minuses him in my book. But I mean,
but I heard that Sam Roken was going to be narrating the Elric books, and that is very cool.
yeah,
So Elric and Hadrian have the same voice, which is pretty neat.
it's pretty
Um,
odd, but it's cool.
yeah,
Because I did actually listen to some of Demon in White as audiobook. So but it's
yeah, he's great. He's been great to work with too. I really, he's done a wonderful job.
yeah, as someone who doesn't really like audiobooks a ton, I really enjoy him. Um, and the book itself is actually decent too. Maybe it's weird to say. I would say it's better than the first Elric book, but it's a lot less action. It's also longer, but yeah, it's a lot less action. But it was also later. I think the first one was written like in the 60s and maybe completed in like 70. But this Fortress of the Pearl was one of the ones he released later, but falls second in the chronology. And so came out like 89 or something. And I heard he's coming out with another Elric book this year, which is
Is
just crazy
that
to think
why they're
about.
doing it? Because I was wondering about this because they're doing all these like new reprints and they're bringing
Mm-hmm.
the old art back and all of this stuff. And it's been going through a little bit of a renaissance. And I was wondering what the deal was, and a new book would explain it. So that's really cool. Because even like I say, like I'm not really well disposed to Michael Moorcock because I don't like his attitude about Tolkien. But like he's important, right? This is the thing, right? We're talking about like protecting the history of fantasy and of science fiction as art forms, right? And
Mm-hmm.
because it's been impossible like to get those books in print properly, right? But I've seen frequent complaints about how hard it is to find them all, and for them to be out in new editions is really nice, and they're like really nice editions too,
Yeah.
right? Michael Whalen art is like again, I'm not even a fan, and it's so cool. Because while I may not be a fan of the Elric stuff, I do like Kirith Ungol, the band, and conveniently,
Wayland's awesome.
they do not use Tolkien art for their albums. They use those old Daw Michael Whelan Elric covers for their album art, and they have since the '80s. Uh,
I have
uh,
those actually. I have the old
they're so
ones.
cool.
So
Do those have the yellow spine too?
yeah, they do.
That's awesome. I kind of wish they still did that for like their mass markets.
Yeah, that'd be nice. That'd be pretty
Um,
cool.
I
I'll
th-
write him a letter.
they
They didn't
do
respond to my
still,
last email, so I'll have to write him a letter.
yeah, they don't necessarily respond to all of mine either. But they do still do the DAW numbers though. If you look, I think on the copyright page, like even my books have DAW numbers. It's like Empire is like 1700 something.
Oh wow,
Uh,
geez, that's
but they
cool though.
still do them, which is really cool. That's really cool stuff. Because stuff like that, and Bane used to do. They didn't used to do numbers or anything, but there used to be this like attempt to like do the corporate marketing, right? And like Daw had the yellow spines, like oh, it's a
Mm-hmm.
Daw book. And if you want a complete set of all the Daw books, here's the numbers, right? Um, there's just something that's very like it's just like very old school nerd about that, and it's gone right now. I like that my books look like they're my books, right?
Right. Yeah.
but at the same time, like it'd be cool if there was a yellow spine version out there.
I would probably just buy it for the yellow spine, to be honest. Like I have a lot, just I mean, essentially for that. I haven't even read them, most of them. I'm just like,
Cool end result too, right? It is a very uniform looking library, and that's kind of neat, right? I think it's part of the appeal, like the Hardy Boys books too, right? It's like, oh, you got a lot of Hardy Boys over there, don't you? Yes, I'm a man of culture. How can you tell? But like it like makes that collection a collection, right? Like it becomes an artifact, like a singular artifact, and that's just cool, it's like the Ace Double too, right? It's like sort of in that vein. Back when they used to do those.
You mean the one and then reversed on the other
Yeah,
side?
you flip the book over and it was another
I don't
book.
actually have one of those. I want one though.
I should have one somewhere. I tried to bring them back, man. When I was working, with Bane. I was like, look, like we're trying to do novellas, right? Like we need the books to be longer, but still be novellas. Let's just put two together and do the double. And they were like, we're not doing that.
No.
Like,
I'm sure whoever originally did it was fighting the long defeat. So I mean,
probably. But it's like, oh come on, it'll be fun. People should not probably listen to me, but
it's not a terrible idea, right? Out. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, you would think. And I was like, and we could put the new authors with the ones that sell, And they're like, this is not a good idea. I'm like, okay, I'll take your word for it.
Okay, fine, sure.
Me and my cool retro, sensibilities will be in the other room, microwaving my lunch. But no, I say that, but like that was a cool job. That was a really cool job.
Yeah, that sounds like a cool job. It's none near me, but I'd like a job like that, at least for an internship to try out. But see if that ever happens.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of small presses, and they're everywhere. So not quite the same, but
yeah, I applied at one point for some small press in Utah. I'm in Idaho right now, but didn't get that. Maybe next time. I'm not an English major, which might help. Just by the first thing to look at. But.
I don't know. I think that could sometimes be a handicap.
Maybe. I mean, I'm in a one linguistics class, and almost everyone in that class is an English major, and they're so cliquey. It's like, keep away from me. I'm just like,
engineering students when I went to school. I went to NC State, which is primarily known as an engineering school, right? And they're like, "Oh, what do you study?" I'm hanging out with a bunch of people. Like, "Oh, I'm in English." I'm like, "You're in what?" Why are you stupid? Couldn't do numbers, but I just sort of you got to deal with it, right? The joke's on them; they have to do math for a living.
Yeah, that is the joke for sure.
So.
I'm glad I'm not doing any sort of math at all.
It's just not my strong suit.
Yeah, man, yeah, my dad, he started going to school. I don't know what's up with my dad actually, but he started going to school for physics, and then he switched seminary, but he didn't believe in God, so that didn't work out. And then eventually, when he went back to school when I was young, but he was doing that before I was alive. He went into humanities, and specifically East Asian humanities. So I don't know.
That is quite the journey for sure.
Yes.
My grandfather was a mechanical engineer, an electrical engineer, and my dad was one of the sort of first generation of full-time programmers, right? And I was like, I am not doing any of it. I've heard you complain about meetings one too many times, right? Like I'm doing anything else. And so I managed to, sneak into a job where I have basically no coworkers. This is a meeting. I feel very fortunate, especially now, right? Because everyone's like, oh, I have so many Zoom meetings, and it's just terrible. I'm like, I basically my job has not changed. So I don't even have to. I don't have to leave the house, but I don't want to. And face human beings. It's cool. I really like doing what it is I do, and I've met a few writers for whom like really the whole thing is about going to conventions and being a writer. Like if I could just write and like never do any of the attached stuff, that'd be okay. Like the writing is still my favorite part of the job, and I hope it always will be. Um,
Yeah. Hopefully, you don't grow sick of it.
Yeah, no, I don't foresee that happening. I
Yeah.
started a short story a couple days ago for my last Bane anthology. I've got one more I'm editing. It's out. It's out the same day Ashes of Man is. God
Oh.
help it. But two different publishers. It happens. And so I started that story. It's the first like new thing that I've started from scratch because I've done so much editing lately, revising. And it was just nice to be home. Where home was the surface of a frozen sail-sunk world ship and everything.
Nice.
Very cold and airless, but it was nice to be back at it. So.
Very homey. Oh, we like there for a second.
Yeah, that's okay. But yeah, so it's good to do the real part of the job.
Yeah, the job of a writer, writing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No,
The people. Some people forget that part. Interesting. Interesting.
That made me think of Elden Ring.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which I actually bought it 2 days ago, so I'm late to the party.
Awesome.
I have never played really any Souls games. I played like the first Dark Souls like 15 minutes. My older and my younger brothers are both really into all those though, and so I was just like, might as well try it. I'm only like an hour and a half in, but I'm actually quite enjoying it. To be
Yeah,
honest, so.
I'm very pleased with it. What I like about those games, I mean, besides the sort of aesthetic experience, right? Because art direction is so good, just in all of them, right? Let me just run around some big overgrown Gothic fortress for countless hours, please. It is just how kind of like old school they are, right? Because they do not explain anything. That is how video games used to be. They were like, you figure it out. You figure out which one of these identical walls is the secret door. Like we're not gonna tell you a damn thing. Good luck. Also, everything will kill you. It's frequently terrible. My friend and I before this were running around through a lake of like poison, basically, in what looked like hell, trying to fight this giant snake, and it just was terrible. And I was having the worst time. But I want to go and I want to go back and kill the damn thing. So I think I've put like 50 hours in or something since it came out. My friend
Sounds
is
like that's about the average at this point.
my friend is like tripled that.
Okay.
But I haven't even finished the game yet. So even close, I don't think. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I have been maybe bullied is the right word into maybe streaming it on the channel. So I might do
That'd be
that
cool.
with my second playthrough. Find an excuse to use the channel a little bit more. I think it'll be fun. But I'm enjoying it. I've liked that whole series. I made fun of it for like kind of being the same story over and over again. But this is the like biggest and the best version of it so far, I think. There may be some gameplay things that some of the older games did better, but I'm really enjoying it. So I hope you like the game too. It's been fun.
Yeah, we'll see how far I get into it. So I mean, I like challenging stuff. Just not overly so, which is what kept me away from the older ones.
Yeah, this one feels a little bit more balanced. You've got some options with like if you're really losing here, you can go do some of the easier dungeons, right? Because the shorter ones are usually a lot easier, and it feels a lot more accessible, I think. And this is coming from someone who could not really finish the DLC for Bloodborne. So
Yeah,
I beat the main boss, but there's a couple extra ones. It's just like I'm done. I'm not doing this. And I love that game. It's one of my favorite games. But man,
I think Bloodborne's my younger brother's favorite. But I actually bought it for him because I'm a good brother. Anyways,
well done. You want to talk about Wolfian things, though? There's something about all of those games that reminds me of Wolf's tone. And part of it is its refusal to explain anything, right? It's like, you will meet me on my terms. And Eugene Wolfe always has the confidence to do that, right? And
Mhm.
it's something about that, but even more specifically, the settings feel, Dark Souls is about the world sort of, the light kind of running down and going cold, and there's sort of that whole there's an entropy motif in a lot of Miyazaki's games
Mhm.
that reminds me of New Sun in a pretty profound way. And I could totally see those books working in this kind of game setting, as like kind of desolate and isolated as a lot of Siberians experience.
So I'd like to walk around with Terminus Est. I'd play that.
Yeah, 100%, right? Like it'd be cool. I want to fight Baldanders in a freaky Frankenstein castle and meet
Yeah.
Adrian. Like I think it would be the way to adapt those books, man. Would be in some weird
Huh.
obscure game.
I'll
Um,
have to mention that to my older brother. Has actually read New Sun, and
oh, cool.
he's about halfway through Long Sun. And like I said, the Souls games are his favorite. So I wonder what he'll think of that.
Yeah, I've spoken to Phil from Elsbo Soup a little bit because he's a big Souls guy too. About how these things feel similar. He's we pretty much agree. When I say spoken a little bit, it's like 3 emails. But I love that podcast too. They're really fun. So.
One of the many. Well, I don't listen to any podcasts right now, but so, I mean, like there's several. If I have time or feel like it, that's actually one I'd probably potentially listen to. So, Rogues in the House, I think, would be another one. Maybe I think that's what it's called.
Is that the Howard? Is that a Howard one?
I think. I mean, yeah, it focuses a lot on like pulpy stuff. So, which is good by me.
Yeah, no. Like I said, those sort of ancient traditions of our field is where my heart really is, right? Which is, to bring it back to my stuff for a bit. That was never anything I kind of intended to do. Was
Mhm.
to sort of touch on the old pulp stuff as I went, because it was really the Dune thing that was sort of the first seed. But as I've
Yeah.
gone along, I've really been like, we need to return to old school science fiction, and that's who I want to be. Uh,
Yeah.
so my long
No.
term plans are maybe a little bit more Vancian. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
I would say with Kingdoms of Death that was the one that felt the most Sword and Planety to me. I think I said that in my review. But and I also just read Princess of Mars, and I have no clue if you were pulling anything from that. But the relationship between John Carter and Deja Thoris reminded me some of Hadrian and Volca, and as well as the Green Martians remind me some of this Yeltsin, just a little bit. But so
Yeah, it said they both could and should be played by Willem Dafoe, I think. But no, I mean, not super consciously, but yeah, like there's some Burroughs and DNA there. And it's interesting you say that too, because with each of these books, I've sort of thought about like which sort of, because I don't think of subgenres like everyone thinks that like grimdark is a genre, right? It's not really, right? It's a collection of tropes that like builds an impression, right? And that's not what a genre is. The books are all, their genre is memoir. If we want to be really technical and a literary person, but like each one, like I feel like needs this, like has a different subgenre, right? Like the first one's really kind of like a Bildungsroman, right? Like a coming of age story. But the second one is totally a gothic novel, right? And the third one's kind of a thriller. And this one I'd been saying it was kind of dystopian, but that's only like part of it, right? And so maybe the sword and sorcery angle is really the right pick for subgenre on this one. I think you may be more right than I was.
those are some good labels for the first three, that's for sure.
Yeah, I've had more time to think about them. So good. The real question is like, what am I going to say about book 5? I don't know. I'll
Well,
cross
I don't
that
know
bridge.
either because I haven't read that one. But
Yeah, well, we'll find out soon. I may come calling and see what you think. Ugh. But yeah. Well, I'm glad you like book 4. I really hope everybody else does when it's out. Here in just a few days. Oh man, it's been a long time since I was.
yeah,
I'm getting a little nervous. Um, You know, I kind of used to how everybody feels about the first three, so we're adding a new one to the mix. It's going to be a kind of a change in the dynamic. So
Yeah, there's a little change, of course. I'm sure it'll be well received for the most part. I mean, as far as I'm aware, from people who've read it, and including myself, I mean, really enjoyed it. I mean, it is definitely a little different from the first three. But as
that
far as like actually like, it's hard to say, because like I view novels some way at times in different lights. Like sometimes just entertainment, but it's also, and sometimes it's just like, how much did this touch me? And a lot of novels don't touch me at all. But it's nice when they do. I like it when they do. And for example, like Empire of Silence. This may sound a little melodramatic, but without going into details, I finished Empire of Silence on one of the worst days of my life, right? And it was super helpful. Okay, like amazing. But then, like looking at like Howling Dark and Demon in White, as far as like entertainment goes, they're probably, I mean, maybe I could say this better written in a way. Kingdoms of Death, I thought, was a good combination of both. Right, like it touched me a lot, but it's great. It's phenomenal. So I'm looking forward to the
thanks.
Ashes of Man. So
Awesome, and I'm glad that book one could be there at the right time. That's like we said a little bit before we started the call, right? Like the big thing is, to be able to do this successfully and to support my family. But if the writing helps anybody in any way, however small, like that's really cool. And so awesome. I'm glad that I'm glad it could help even a little bit. Um,
me too.
I'm sorry you had that bad day, whatever it might have been. But
Oh well, it's not today, so that's good, right?
yeah, well, there's that.
So yeah,
Yeah, but thanks, for reading and for this and everything. So,
yeah. It was a. Thanks for coming and talking to me. Actually, I'll probably end it here in a minute. Actually, but it was really fun. I hope whoever watches this enjoys it as well. Um, Hopefully, we talked about enough of Sun Eater for the audience who's just here for that. But I mean, hopefully, they stayed for the books and other things.
well, the whole plan was to talk about wherever we went, right? And I
Yeah.
think I think it was fun. So thanks for having me. This was great. And if you don't mind the plug, real briefly, book 4, Kingdoms of Death, is out on Tuesday, March 22nd, wherever books are sold. I'm going to do a live stream to celebrate the release of that book that same evening at I think 7 p.m. My channel is Sun Eater Books here on YouTube. If you want to come join the show, everybody. If this has come out after that, because I don't know what your plans are, you can go see the channel.
I'm not sure yet either, but I'll figure that out.
So no pressure. But thanks for having me on, Liam. This was awesome.
Yeah, thanks for joining. And again, yeah, go and check out Christopher Ruocchio's books. Make sure you say it's Ruocchio and not Ruocchio, like I did the first time I read it.
Everybody does. So.
But
I'm
great books.
well used to it. I had one lady ever get it right the first time, and I dropped my phone. So.
Oh wow. Okay.
I won't worry about it.
Okay, we'll see. Anyways, thanks for watching, everyone. Catch you next time.
You bet.